Chapter 1238. Of course, this alive wasn't referring to the remnant divine consciousness, but the real Shengguan Jing. No, if it could leave the divine artifact and survive independently, then it shouldn't be called divine consciousness. That was Taizu's real soul. Chu Liyue's question made Taizu fall silent. After a while, the great ancestor let out a long sigh. I don't know either. His voice was much lower, as if he had aged a lot in an instant. It was mixed with the loneliness and lamentation of thousands of years, as well as a trace of confusion. This was the first time Chu Liyue heard Taizu speak to her in such a tone. He seemed to really not know. I spent thousands of years alone in the Tianling God realm. There are indeed many things that I have forgotten, including my death back then. Chu Liyue's heart skipped a beat. In the secret history of the Tianling dynasty, it had always been recorded that Taizu had tried to break through the shackles and become a god-level powerhouse, but he failed and died. After his death, the Long Yuan sword was left in the half-divine realm that he had painstakingly condensed as a supporting divine artifact. As for the great ancestor, it was only natural that he should have vanished into thin air in that failure. Chu Liyue had always believed in this matter, because what she had heard and seen before was exactly the same. Although she had secretly wondered why Taizu's divine consciousness hadn't dissipated after the Long Yuan sword recognized its master. But at that time, she didn't think too much about it. Until now, Taizu could actually be independent of the divine artifact. Moreover, Taizu even said that he had forgotten his death back then? How could a top powerhouse forget what happened at the end of his life? There was probably something wrong with this. Chuyu? Luo Shirshir and Zhuosheng walked for a while before realizing that Chu Liyue wasn't following them. She turned around and saw that she was standing there alone, as if in a daze. Zhuosheng raised his voice again. Chuyu, what are you thinking about? We should go. Chu Liyue finally regained his senses. He's here. As she spoke, she walked towards the two of them. What happened to you? Zhuosheng looked at her strangely. Everything was fine just now. How did it become like this all of a sudden? Chuyu, are you alright? Luo Shirshir frowned worriedly. Although the expression on Chuyu's face was still relatively calm, this kind of absent-minded appearance was extremely rare. Chu Liyue closed his eyes and suppressed the waves in his heart. Don't worry, I'm fine. It's just that I suddenly thought of something just now, and was lost in it for a moment. So I didn't follow you guys. Hey, what's the matter? Why are you so concerned about it? Zhuosheng's interest was immediately piqued. He grinned and asked mysteriously. Chu Liyue smiled. It's nothing important. It's not worth mentioning. This meant that he didn't want to reveal it. However, Zhuosheng wasn't someone who wanted to get to the bottom of things. Seeing that Chu Liyue didn't want to say more, he didn't continue asking. It's not too late to think about it when we get back. Let's hurry up and leave. If we're late, we won't be able to bear the consequences. Luo Shirshir frowned slightly, but she didn't ask any more questions. The three of them continued to walk down the mountain. This time they left in time. When they reached the bottom of the mountain and walked out of the barrier, they vaguely heard the sound of wind and thunder coming from the top of the mountain. Chu Liyue turned around to take a look. In fact, they couldn't see anything through the barrier. However, she seemed to be able to feel the imposing Tianlei falling down one after another. It was a pity that she couldn't stay here. She retracted her gaze, said goodbye to Luo Shirshir, and left on her own. When she returned to Jiuheng Mountain, it was already late at night. However, the light in Rong Xiu's room was still on. Rong Xiu had just walked out of his room. You're back. Chu Liyue's heart warmed. She didn't know if it was because of Rong Xiu's patience or something else. For a moment, she clearly felt a sweet and soft warmth surging from the bottom of her heart to her limbs and bones, enveloping her. She nodded. You've been waiting for me? Rong Xiu's lips curled into a faint smile. Yes and no. I was looking at something quite interesting just now. Anything that caught Rong Xiu's eye was definitely not an ordinary item. Chu Liyue was a little interested. What is it? Rong Xiu walked over and held her hand. Come with me. His warm and broad palm instantly wrapped around her somewhat cold hand. The familiar cold fragrance filled her body, making her feel more at ease and her whole body relaxed. She obediently followed Rong Xiu into the room. After entering, Rong Xiu brought her to the desk. Chu Luyue immediately saw a book on top of it. The pages of the book were yellowed, and it seemed to be quite old. Is this the thing you're talking about? Chu Luyue looked at Rong Xiu strangely. Rong Xiu raised his chin and smiled. Take a look first. Only then did Chu Luyue pick up the book. However, when she held it in her hand, she was shocked to find that the book looked old and thin. But it was actually very heavy. If it wasn't for her physical strength, she might not have been able to pick it up. What is this? Chu Luyue's voice came to an abrupt halt when she saw the cover. Because there was a painting on it. It was a carefully drawn picture of a sword. It was simple, grand, solemn, and dignified. The lines seemed to penetrate the back of the paper, wrapped in a great force. Just a casual glance like this almost made one unable to breathe. However, this was not the most important thing. Because the sword drawn in this picture was clearly the divine artifact that she had obtained not long ago. Digression. September Peripheral Event Winners List. 1A. Star of Monthly Votes. Shue Shueli 142/2. Star of Commentary. UUX9 Memories of Qian 2. QQ Reading Star of Recommendation Votes. Dislike. 150. Star of Commentary. Lingbao Luoshi Down. Red Sleeves. Please join the group as soon as possible and find February to verify the peripheral events. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1239. This is. She looked at Rong Xiu in shock. This is the notebook left behind by that senior, said Rong Xiu with a smile. It took me a lot of effort to find it. Although these words sounded like a joke, Chu Luyue understood that it was extremely difficult to find this book. There were tens of millions of books in the academy. It was easy to imagine how much effort it took to find this book in the vast sea of books. Moreover, the academy had spent a lot of effort to get this divine artifact back. Everything related to it must have been strictly guarded. Rong Xiu could even get his hands on this. Chu Luyue held the book. Her fingertips could still feel the rough and heavy pages of the book. Something seemed to be surging in her chest. This thing, the academy wouldn't let it out so easily, right? How did you get it? Without that divine artifact, the existence of this notebook is meaningless. In the whole world, this notebook is only a true treasure in your hands. If they didn't give it to you, it would be meaningless to leave it on the shelf. So this thing isn't that difficult to get. Rong Xiu said it casually, but Chu Luyue knew that things weren't that simple. But Rong Xiu obviously didn't intend to explain in detail. Even if she continued to ask, she probably wouldn't get anything out of him. I promised you before that I would bring this thing to you. Naturally, I won't go back on my word. Rong Xiu said as he held her face and kissed her forehead. His breath was warm, as if it could make one's heart boil. Chu Luyue looked up at him. Rong Xiu. Her red lips moved slightly. She wanted to say something, but after thinking about it, she felt that words were so weak. This man would always stand by her side and give her everything she wanted. In the whole world, there were very few people who could do this. However, he did it. And from the beginning until now, he had never flaunted how good he was. It was as if all this was natural. How rare was it to have such a husband in this world? She reached out and grabbed the front of Rong Xiu's shirt and pulled hard. Rong Xiu cooperated and bowed slightly. Chu Luyue kissed his lips. This kiss was unbelievably soft and sweet, dazzlingly sweet. After a while the two finally separated. Rong Xiu held her tightly in his arms and rested his chin on her shoulder. His voice was low and hoarse. Is this a reward? His voice still carried a trace of muddiness from his infatuation, and when it entered her ears, it practically instantly entered into the depths of her heart, causing her heart to tremble. No, Chu Luyue closed his eyes. It's love. In the end, Chu Luyue returned to his room. According to a certain someone, he wasn't sure what would happen if they stayed together under such circumstances. Therefore, Chu Luyue went back obediently. Late at night, the surroundings were silent. Only the occasional rustling of the night wind through the forest could be heard, but it seemed even lonelier. Chu Luyue sat cross-legged, holding the notebook in her hand. At this time, that frightening aura still didn't diminish at all. Chu Liyue's gaze swept over it carefully. This was a sword. Some strange golden patterns were engraved on the scabbard, looking solemn and mysterious. The sword hilt was blue gold, and carved into a dragon's head. Its eyes were deep, as of bottomless darkness. Just by looking at it like this, one would feel as if they were about to be swallowed by it. Further up was a round stem, smooth and clean, completely black, with a tassel hanging from the end. So this sword is also related to the dragon clan. Chu Liyue murmured softly. If that was the case, it was no wonder that the sword soul of the Dragon Abyss sword could be successfully integrated into it. Of course, there should be Taizu's help in this to succeed in the end. She moved her mind. Flowing light flashed in front of her. In the next moment, a long sword suddenly appeared in front of her. It floated quietly in midair. But the surrounding space seemed to be slightly distorted by this terrifying aura. This showed how strong the power contained in it was. Chu Liyue stared at the sword in front of her. It looked exactly the same as the one drawn in the notebook. However, because that book was an item from too long ago, although it was well preserved, it was still yellowed and old. It looked as if it was covered with a layer of grayish-yellow gauze. When this sword appeared in front of her, she could clearly feel the vast aura that seemed to come from a distant time and space. Everything was so fresh. Chu Liyue flipped open the notebook. 3 vigorous and powerful words appeared on the title page. Red Cloud Sword. Chu Liyue carefully flipped through the entire book bit by bit. When she finished reading the last page, she closed it, finally closed her eyes, and let out a long breath. So, the owner of this sword, who was also its forger, was Elder Fan Bei. Back then, Elder Fan Bei obtained a precious sword embryo, and made up his mind to forge a peerless sword. In order to forge this sword, he went to the Dark Feathers Abyss, and spent a full 3 months there, guiding Tianlei to temper it every day before finally forging it. Unfortunately, these 3 months had exhausted all his strength and blood essence. The moment Red Cloud Sword appeared, he was already a lamp that had run out of oil. In the end, he knew that he did not have much time left, so he simply took the blood from his heart and poured it on Red Cloud Sword. With his own life as a guide, he made it reborn and crossed the threshold of a venerable artifact. In the end, the sword was forged and he died. And this Red Cloud Sword, before it could be born, fell in the Dark Feathers Abyss together with it. For thousands of years, this sword was buried deep and never saw the light of day again. Until recently, when the Dark Feathers Abyss was in chaos, the Lingxiao College elders realized that Red Cloud Sword was about to be born. In fact, many people knew that there was a divine artifact buried in the Dark Feathers Abyss. Otherwise, the Golden Wing sect and many other sects would not have sent so many people to fight for it. It was rumored that it was an Emperor divine artifact. But in fact, it was a real venerable artifact. Fortunately, this thing was snatched back by the Lingxiao College in the end, and not many people knew the true level of this divine artifact. Otherwise, it would have become a big trouble. This book was written by Elder Fan Bei when he was forging the Scarlet Heaven Sword in the past. It recorded every step of forging Red Cloud Sword, and also some of Elder Fan Bei's experience. However, because Elder Fan Bei died when this sword was just forged, he did not leave behind the incantation to use it. Thus, Chu Liyue could only research it herself from the previous records. However, this level of divine artifact was extremely intelligent. As long as she could completely master it, this would not be a problem. Chu Liyue put away the book and looked up at Red Cloud Sword in front of her. She took a deep breath and held the sword hilt. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1240. Then she pulled with all her might. The Scarlet Heaven Sword did not move at all. Chu Liyue was stunned and took a closer look. This sword, it's not rusty. Why can't I pull it out? She gritted her teeth, increased her strength, and tried again. The Scarlet Heaven Sword still did not react. The sword seemed to be firmly embedded in the scabbard. No matter how Chu Liyue tried, she could not pull it out. After failing several times, Taizu's voice sounded faintly. Girl, don't waste your energy. If you don't refine this sword, you won't be able to use it. Chu Liyue suddenly came back to her senses. What? Doesn't that mean that as long as I don't refine it, I won't be able to use this sword? Taizu pondered for a moment and said seriously, that seems to be the case. Oh right, I forgot to tell you. Because the Long Yuan sword soul has been transferred to this sword, so from now on, the Long Yuan sword is useless. Chu Liyue's heart skipped a beat, and she immediately summoned the Long Yuan sword. The black arrow was cold and heavy in her hand. She poured her force into it, but the Long Yuan sword did not have any reaction. The pressure of a venerable artifact is heavy, and it can easily crush the Long Yuan sword. If I wasn't here, the Long Yuan sword would have been destroyed the moment the sword soul was transferred. Taizu sighed. How can a venerable artifact be so easy to control? Chu Liyue. So what was her situation now? The Long Yuan sword could not be used, and the Scarlet Heaven sword could not even be pulled out. She rubbed the space between her eyebrows with a headache. If that was the case, didn't that mean that she only had one path left? Hee girl, actually this is nothing. Anyway, with me here, I can help you trigger Tianlei, and you can also complete the tempering. Isn't this quite simple? Chu Liyue. Taizu seemed to think too highly of her, but at this point, it seemed that there was no other way to solve the problem other than this. She thought for a moment. Then Taizu, please lend me a hand. Chu Liyue walked out of the room and came to the top of the mountain. To trigger Tianlei, this place was naturally the most suitable. The only concern was that if the commotion was too big, it would attract the attention of many people's attention. But now, she could not care less. Besides, there's a barrier that Rong Xiu set up outside Zhuheng Mountain, so it should be able to hide it. Chu Liyue found a relatively flat spot on the mountain peak, took out the star stone, and placed Qi Xiao's sword on it. A translucent figure flew out. It was the great ancestor. Chu Liyue glanced at Taizu's eyes. Great ancestor, why do I feel that your body seems to have become much more solid than before? In the past, the great ancestor's phantom was filled with an illusory aura, but now, there was a huge change. Liyue's S of God, yes, I feel the same way. The longer he stayed with Chu Liyue, the stronger his aura became. When they first met, he was almost in a state where he could disappear at any time. But now he was getting stronger. He didn't know what was going on either. However, ever since the sword soul of the Dragon Abyss sword entered the Scarlet Heaven sword, he realized that he no longer needed to rely on it and could live freely. Chu Liyue was more and more certain of her previous guess. This should be a part of Taizu's soul. It was just that 1,000 years had reduced his strength and destroyed his memories. That was why even he thought that he was just a remnant of his divine consciousness. Chu Liyue thought for a moment. Suddenly, a thought flashed through her mind. If Taizu's soul was still there, then, when she refined Scarlet Heaven Sword soul, did that mean that Taizu would have a chance to take over her body and come back to life? She took a deep breath and suppressed this thought. It would not be too late to think about everything after the refinement was completed. Girl, step back a little. Taizu stood in the air with a serious expression. Chu Liyue took 5 steps back. Her eyes were fixed on the star stone and Scarlet Heaven sword that was placed on it. Taizu raised his hands, and the aura around him began to surge crazily. A powerful aura spread out in all directions. Soon dark clouds gathered in the sky. The originally bright moon was covered by thick clouds, and the world became darker and darker. There were rolling mountains all around, and it was silent. Only the sound of the wind passed through the mountains, and the forest rustled. Chu Liyue's heart seemed to be gripped by something, and her ears were filled with the sound of her heart beating violently. The wind and clouds whistled. Dark clouds surged. Finally, a bright bolt of heavenly lightning shot out from behind the accumulated layers of clouds. Then a second one. A third one. Chu Liyue sucked in a breath of cold air. The speed of Tianlei's appearance was far beyond her imagination. Who knew how many Tianlei's tempering would be needed to refine a venerable divine weapon's soul? Such a scene was far from what she could compare to when she forged the Cloud Sky Copper Sword. Almost at the same time, Rong Xiu, who had just laid down, suddenly opened his eyes. He lifted the blanket and jumped down from the bed. He pushed open the door and looked toward the top of the mountain. Several Tianlei were circling in the sky, swimming wildly. He narrowed his eyes, and then raised his hand. A golden stream of light flew out, transforming into countless light spots, and landed on the barrier outside Mount Jiuheng. The barrier strengthened again, and completely concealed everything that was happening inside. Chu Luiyue was completely unaware of this, because all her attention was on the Tianlei that was about to land. In a short time, dozens of silver snake-like Tianlei had gathered in the dark clouds. Most importantly, the number was still increasing. Back then, in order to forge the Dragon Abyss sword, I triggered a total of 81 Tianlei. Now that the Scarlet Cloud sword is a venerable divine weapon, I don't know how big of a commotion it will cause. Taizu said in a low voice as he triggered the Tianlei. Chu Liyue's eyelids twitched violently. The Scarlet Cloud sword was 2 grades higher than the Dragon Abyss sword, and there was a huge gap between them. It was simply unimaginable to fill the gap between them. The black star stone reflected the numerous Tianlei in the sky, and the stars flickered. Finally, when the stars covered it, the Scarlet Cloud sword finally rose slowly into the air. It floated quietly above the star stone, and its entire body emitted a shocking aura. It had not officially started yet, but Chu Liyue already felt as if her heart was being heavily pressed by something, and even breathing became difficult. I wonder what kind of scene it would be when the Tianlei landed. Just as this thought flashed through her mind, she heard a loud sound coming from the sky. Boom! A thick and dazzling bolt of heavenly lightning struck down in an instant. It went straight for the Scarlet Cloud sword. Chu Liyue was almost blinded by the dazzling light. Following that, loud rumbling sounds rang out one after another. Boom! Boom! It was those Tianlei that struck down one after another. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1241. Chu Liyue had never seen such a scene before. Countless Tianlei surged over crazily as if they were free. Like a huge silver sword, it broke through the clouds and slashed down from the sky. Looking up, it was as if it was going to split the heavens and earth. The light was dazzling and the sound was earth-shattering. The powerful impact almost sent Chu Liyue flying. She immediately stabbed the long yuan sword into the ground. She clenched her fists tightly, to prevent herself from being swept away by the wind. Her clothes fluttered in the wind, and only the crazy whistling sound was left in her ears. The great ancestor's expression was unprecedentedly serious and solemn, because from the moment he saw those Tianlei appear, he knew that today would be a tough battle. He was afraid that this would be the most powerful Tianlei that he had ever summoned in his life. After those Tianlei fell, new Tianlei quickly appeared. Taizu's power was quickly consumed in the crazy and terrifying tempering process. At such times, time seemed to be especially difficult to endure. Just as Chu Liyue felt that her face was about to be cut by that terrifying power, the Scarlet Cloud sword finally moved. A golden light appeared on the scabbard. It flashed quietly. The surrounding Tianlei's light was very dazzling, but when this golden light appeared, it did not cover up even a fraction of its brilliance. Chu Liyue saw clearly that it was the golden pattern on the scabbard that exploded with bright light. Girl, go! Great Ancestor bellowed. Chu Liyue immediately leaped. She grabbed the hilt of the Scarlet Cloud sword. Countless silver lights flashed on the scabbard. The hilt was cold, but the power of the Tianlei was boiling. The two extreme powers merged together. Chu Liyue gritted her teeth and grabbed the sword tightly. A familiar aura gradually surged into her heart. It was the sword spirit of the Long Yuan sword. In order to refine it into an artifact soul, Scarlet Heaven sword had to withstand the beating of these Tianlei. For some reason, the Tianlei people avoided Chu Liyue when they passed by him. This relieved her of a lot of pressure. As the Tianlei continued to fall, a seal on the scabbard seemed to be peeling off. The runes that had been silent for 1,000 years finally began to emit their original golden light. Chu Liyue gripped the hilt of her sword with both hands, allowing the violent energy to surge around her. But she remained unmoved. A wisp of origin power quietly poured into Scarlet Heaven sword. Time seemed to have become particularly unbearable. After an unknown period of time, Chu Liyue's hands had become numb from the terrifying power. The power in his body was almost impossible to suppress. and there were faint signs that it was about to go berserk. However, Tianlei was still striking down. It seemed like it would never end. Chu Luiyue forced his eyes open and looked up. In the bright silver light that filled the sky, she almost couldn't see anything clearly. This meant that Tianlei's attack was far from over. She gritted her teeth and tried her best to circulate the origin power in her body. More and more power was poured into Scarlet Heaven's sword, and the golden runes on the scabbard became clearer. She could clearly feel that the subtle connection between her and Scarlet Heaven's sword was also constantly strengthening. As long as she persevered until the end, she would definitely succeed. However, at this moment, a sudden and strange fluctuation came from behind her. Chu Luiyue looked back, and through the flickering light, she was shocked to see Taizu kneeling on the ground, as if his strength was exhausted. His body became much more illusory, as if he would be blown away by the wind at any time. His face was even paler, and his originally spirited face seemed to have aged a lot in an instant. Chu Luiyue's heart clenched. "Taizu," she shouted nervously. "How are you?" Hearing her voice, Taizu forced himself to stand up. I'm fine. It's just that there's too much Tianlei, and I've consumed too much energy." Hearing the weakness in his voice, Chu Luiyue became even more worried. Although Taizu did not have a physical body, his strength was tyrannical. This was the first time she had seen him so weak. It was really worrying. Boom, boom, boom. Tianlei was still falling one after another, and Taizu's aura was weakening at a speed visible to the naked eye. Chu Luiyue quickly glanced at Scarlet Heaven's sword. Only 1/3 of the runes on the scabbard had lit up. This couldn't go on. Chu Luiyue thought calmly. Looking at Taizu's current state, he definitely wouldn't be able to hold on until the end. Scarlet Heaven's sword was a venerable artifact. In order to refine the sword soul into an artifact soul, the number of Tianlei needed was astonishing. It was indeed impossible to complete it with Taizu's strength alone. Chu Luiyue didn't want to disregard Taizu's life for this. "Taizu, please stop triggering Tianlei immediately." Chu Luiyue quickly made a decision and shouted loudly. Of course, Taizu refused. No. What kind of treasure was a venerable artifact? It was a great opportunity for this girl to be lucky enough to obtain it. Many people wouldn't even be able to see it once in their lifetime, but she was so lucky to obtain it. How could he not cherish it? Even if he had to exhaust the last bit of his strength, he had to help her to the end. Then Taizu calmed down, raised his chi and flew up. In the gloomy sky, several more bolts of heavenly lightning appeared. The wind howled, and Taizu's figure seemed to be on the verge of collapse. Chu Luiyue watched from below, extremely nervous and distressed. She knew very well that Taizu was already close to his limit. If he didn't stop, the consequences would be unimaginable. This was not Taizu's remnant divine sense, but his true soul. If anything happened to him today, he would really be consigned to eternal damnation. Chu Luiyue's chest seemed to be burning with flames, and a trace of scarlet appeared in her eyes. "Taizu, please return." Taizu stood in midair, his body straight. He didn't look back. In the dark and dazzling world, he seemed to be alone. As time passed, Taizu's aura became weaker and weaker. Gradually, no more Tianlei appeared in the sky. Taizu's heart sank. According to his realm, even if he risked his life, he wouldn't be able to summon enough Tianlei. Boom! The last Tianlei struck. Taizu's face turned pale. He finally turned around and looked at Chu Luiyue. His expression was apologetic, and his lips trembled. It's Taizu's fault for being useless." Chu Luiyue shook her head. "You've done your best. Luyu can't thank you enough." At this moment, only half of the patterns on Scarlet Heaven's sword lit up. Chu Luiyue closed her eyes. When he opened his eyes again, there seemed to be undercurrents and flames burning in his black jade-like eyes. She gripped Scarlet Heaven's sword tightly, and immediately stood up. Most of her body had already been affected by that terrifying power, and she couldn't feel anything. At this moment, she was only relying on her last bit of willpower to hold Scarlet Heaven's sword tightly. Taizu let out a long sigh. "Unfortunately, it's a waste of energy this time," Chu Luiyue said. "Not necessarily." Taizu was stunned. "What other ways do you have?" Chu Luiyue narrowed her eyes and looked in a certain direction. "Tianlei. There was a place that had plenty of places. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1242. Chu Luiyue looked up. Outside Jiuheng Mountain, a faint golden barrier flickered quietly in the dark night. Her heart skipped a beat, and she turned to look at a certain place at the foot of the mountain. A tall figure was flying over at a high speed. It was Rong Xiao. He was extremely fast, and in the blink of an eye, he had arrived in front of her from afar. The two of them looked at each other. Chu Luiyue said, "I'm going to Thousand Wine Mountain." Rong Xiao nodded slightly. "I'll accompany you." There was no need for any explanation. With just a look, they could understand each other's intentions and thoughts. Chu Luiyue's heart warmed, and her pale lips curled up slightly. "Aren't you going to ask me what I'm going to do?" Rong Xiao raised his eyebrows. "That's not important. As long as you want to go, I'll go with you." As he spoke, his gaze swept across the Scarlet Heaven sword in Chu Luiyue's hand. "Follow me." As soon as he finished speaking, he waved his wrist, and the barrier on the mountaintop suddenly rippled. Immediately an exit opened. His figure moved, and he took the lead to charge out. Chu Luiyue followed closely behind. After the two of them left, the barrier quickly closed up, concealing everything silently. From the outside, it was as if nothing had happened. It was late at night, and the entire academy was silent. The two of them set off from Jiuheng Mountain and went straight to Thousand Wine Mountain. Rong Xiao seemed to be very familiar with that place, and he almost didn't stop on the way, because he was worried that the fluctuations of Scarlet Heaven's sword would attract attention. He deliberately set up a barrier around Chu Luiyue to completely conceal her aura. Just like that, the two of them successfully arrived at the foot of Thousand Wine Mountain. In the dark night, the barrier on Thousand Wine Mountain was almost invisible. From the outside, one could only see the undulating peaks and the shadows of the trees and forests. The surroundings were silent. However, Chu Luiyue's heart was beating rapidly. The Scarlet Heaven sword in her hand emitted a strange fluctuation. She lowered her head to take a look. The silver tianlei that originally covered it had almost disappeared. As for the half of the golden veins that had been lit up with much difficulty, it also showed signs of fainting. This was because the amount of tianlei he had summoned was too little, and he hadn't been able to completely refine the sword soul into an artifact soul. That was why it was stuck in the middle, neither moving up nor down. If he couldn't make up for it in time, not only would this refinement fail, everything he had experienced before would be in vain. Therefore, he absolutely could not give up. Chu Luiyue looked up at the barrier in front of him. A vast pressure spread out from within. Ever since the incident with her, the Academy's elders seemed to have strengthened the barrier around the Thousand Wine Mountain. In her current state, it was impossible for her to break in. Fortunately, there was still Rong Xiao. He stood in front of the barrier and raised his hand. A few golden rays of light flew out and formed a strange profound formation in the air. That small golden profound formation lightly stuck onto the barrier. Wang! An entrance quickly appeared. Chu Luiyue couldn't hide her surprise as she looked at Rong Xiao. Seeing that his expression was normal and his eyes were calm, she finally couldn't help but ask. "Rong Xiao, this isn't the first time you've done this, right? This technique, no matter how you look at it, it's so familiar." Rong Xiao's thin lips curled up slightly as he glanced at her with a faint smile. "I learned it from you. Chu Luiyue. What did she do in the academy in the past?" And from Rong Xiao's words, it seemed like she had led him astray. "Go up, I'll tell you about this later." Or just like the matter of the herb garden, she would unknowingly recall it. Rong Xiao said as he stepped into the barrier. Chu Luiyue took a deep breath and went in with her sword. After entering the barrier, Chu Luiyue's first reaction was to look up at the top of the mountain. As expected, there was a figure standing at the highest point of the mountain. Above the sky, dark clouds gathered as tianlei flashed and struck down continuously. From the looks of it, he seemed to be refining weapons. Those tianlei, some fell in front of him, while some fell into the spring. Even though they were separated by such a distance, Chu Luiyue could still feel the astonishing power contained in those tianlei. She licked her pale and cracked lips. This was what she needed the most now. However, That person seemed to be an elder of the academy. It wouldn't be appropriate for her to barge in directly. However, just as Chu Luiyue was thinking hard about how to negotiate with that person, the Scarlet Heaven sword in her hand suddenly flew out. Swoosh! The Scarlet Heaven sword drew a faint golden line in the air. In the blink of an eye, it had already rushed to the top of the mountain. Chu Luiyue was shocked, and she immediately followed him without thinking. She had only pondered for a moment when the Scarlet Heaven sword seized this opportunity and directly escaped from her hand. And it was heading straight for the top of the mountain. No, it was heading for the Tianlei. Chu Luiyue had already used her full speed, but no matter how powerful she was, could she be faster than a venerable artifact? Soon, under her shocked gaze, the Scarlet Heaven sword rushed up. Those Tianlei seemed to have sensed something and suddenly turned around and slashed down at it. Boom, boom, boom. The sound shook the sky. Flames shot in all directions. Chu Luiyue was almost unable to open her eyes because of the dazzling light. She could only endure the pain and stare at it. The Tianlei that were supposed to fall were all intercepted by the Scarlet Heaven sword halfway. Shang Yusin was originally focused on refining, when he suddenly sensed an abnormal energy fluctuation. He suddenly looked in that direction, but he only saw something flash past. Then, several bolts of heavenly lightning exploded above his head. Boom! Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network. Chapter 1243. Shang Yusin's first reaction was to set up a barrier around himself. The terrifying power of the explosion was completely blocked outside. Even so, the Tianlei was right above his head. The distance was extremely close, and it was impossible to completely avoid it. That shocking aura rushed over, causing his chest to feel stuffy, and he almost knelt on the ground. However, he still forced himself to stand and quickly looked up. At this moment, he finally saw clearly what had happened. The heavenly lightning that was supposed to descend had been completely intercepted by a sword that had appeared out of nowhere. Silver light flickered on it, and sparks flew everywhere. Bang! The sound of something exploding was heard. Shang Yusin looked down, and saw that the yuan instrument that he had painstakingly forged had cracked, because the Tianlei's tempering had been interrupted, and the change in temperature was too great. Shang Yusin raised his eyebrows and threw the item on the ground. He couldn't help but shout. Who the F***ck did this? His shout was like thunder, instantly reverberating throughout the myriad wine mountain. Chu Luiyue paused and felt a little guilty. She had originally planned to bring Scarlet Heaven's sword here, and wait for the Tianlei in the spring to gather again, before putting it in for tempering. Who knew that things would develop like this? At this moment, Shang Yusin also noticed Chu Luiyue's existence, and looked over with his sharp eyes. Who? Come out! As he shouted, he angrily rushed over, intending to arrest her. Seeing that the other party was rushing down, Chu Luiyue knew that she couldn't hide, so she quickly stood out. Student Chu greets elder. Only then did Shang Yusin see the person in front of him clearly. This was a youth who looked no more than 16 or 17 years old. His figure was thin and slender, and his face was delicate and clean. His face was a little pale, and there was a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. It was obvious that he had just been through trouble. Shang Yusin shouted angrily. At this time, all students in the academy are forbidden from stepping into Myriad Wine Mountain. Don't you know? Chu Luiyue thought that of course she knew, and this was not the first time she had committed a crime. She raised her eyes slightly and looked over the shoulder of the middle-aged man in front of her. In the air, Scarlet Heaven's sword was continuously swallowing the Tianlei that was falling from the sky. Moreover, there were quite a few of them in Tianlei, which showed that this person was not weak. She was slightly relieved and bowed to admit her mistake. Elder is right. I didn't do it on purpose. It was just a moment of desperation that I accidentally barged in. Don't tell me these useless things. When Shang Yusin thought of the incomplete divine artifact that he had destroyed, he couldn't help but feel angry. He had been in Lingxiao College for so many years, but this had never happened before. A student. He had actually barged into the Thousand Wine Mountain, just like that, even interrupting his refining process and intercepting his Tianlei. You must have eaten a bear's heart and leopard's gall. I think you're going against the heavens. You immediately put away that broken thing of yours. Then, ask your master to come over and apologize to me personally. Chu Luiyue was stunned for a moment, and felt a little troubled. Scarlet Heaven Sword had rushed out by itself, just now. It would not be that easy for her to put it away now. Besides, she had come for the Tianlei of the Thousand Wine Mountain. It was not easy for her to find it, so how could she just leave like that? As for asking her master to come over, she wondered what Elder Wanjing's expression would be if he heard this news. Chu Luiyue hesitated for a moment, then revealed an apologetic and earnest smile. Elder, what happened today was really purely an accident. I know that I was wrong and the consequences are serious. There is no reason for me to escape punishment no matter what. But can you please wait for a while? Shang Yusin raised his eyebrows and glared at her. Wait for what? Chu Luiyue paused for a moment, then stretched out a finger and pointed upwards. She lowered her voice and said, just wait for me to finish refining the yuan instrument. Shang Yusin was so angry that he almost laughed. He had never seen a student like this before. Not only did she make a mistake, but she also took advantage of him. She was about to die, but she still had the nerve to ask for conditions. Huh? He sized up Chu Luiyue again. Alright, kid, you're young, but you've got guts. What kind of treasure is that yuan instrument of yours? You even dared to snatch the Tianlei that I triggered. You. Suddenly, his voice stopped abruptly, and the way he stared at Chu Luiyue changed. Chu Luiyue felt inexplicably guilty, and could not help but ask. Elder, why are you looking at me like that? Shang Yusin narrowed his eyes. What did you say your name was? Chu Luiyue answered honestly. Chu Yu. It's really you. Shang Yusin's mouth twitched. He was too agitated just now, so he did not hear or pay attention to Chu Luiyue's self-introduction. It was only after taking a closer look that he felt a little familiar. Chu Yu. Wasn't that the kid he and Bo Yin were talking about during the day? Chu Luiyue blinked. The elders of Lingxiao College basically knew her by now, but this seemed to be the first time they met. And she also felt that this face was a little unfamiliar, as if she had never seen it before. If I remember correctly, you were locked up in Mount Pengmin for trespassing on Mount Wanjiu, right? How long has it been since you came out? As Shang Yusin spoke, he suddenly thought of something and turned around abruptly. Wait. That thing. Is that the divine artifact that I took back from Blue Feather's abyss? The item that Chu Yu brought with him, which was powerful enough to intercept his Tianlei, seemed to be that? Cough, Elder is wise. Chu Luiyue smiled awkwardly and said very honestly and uneasily, I'm sorry. I really don't have any other intentions this time. I just want to borrow a few Tianlei. Digression. Dear friends of the September list, please join the group as soon as possible for verification. The list will be updated on the 7th. After the comment section is opened, it will also be pinned. In addition, from today until the morning of the 13th, there will be a super huge event in the comment section. For details, please see pinned. Other readers other than Xiaoxiang can also participate in the event. Thank you, Big Pair. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1244. Shang Yusin thought that he was hallucinating. What did you say? He gritted his teeth and asked word by word. Every word seemed to be squeezed out from the gaps between his teeth, with a hint of gnashing teeth. Chu Luiyue shrank her neck. There was nothing she could do. She had snatched his things, so she felt guilty. But there was really nothing she could do about this. Who knew that he was refining here? Besides, after she came here, she didn't do anything, and Scarlet Heaven Sword ran out on its own. It wasn't all her fault. However, she didn't dare to say such words of justification again. And it seemed that it was useless to say it. She lowered her head. This student knows her mistake. This sincere appearance of admitting her mistake made Shang Yusin unable to vent his anger. You're quite promising. Borrow Tianlei. To think that you can say that. Shang Yusin flicked his sleeve and looked back at the top of the mountain. In the Tianlei that was constantly hacking down, a long sword could be vaguely seen. That's Scarlet Heaven Sword? He narrowed his eyes and asked. Chu Luiyue was a little surprised that he actually recognized the sword. But on second thought, after all, he was an elder of the academy, so it wasn't strange for him to know this. After all, this was a divine artifact refined by the academy's ancestors. And that notebook had always been kept in the academy. Yes, you got lucky, kid. Shang Yusen snorted. He had been thinking about this thing for so many years, but he never got to see it. Who would have thought that he would miss it during a short period of seclusion? The key was that Scarlet Heaven Sword had recognized a master. A venerable divine artifact recognizing a master. It wasn't that simple. He didn't know how this kid did it. Chu Luiyue lowered her head even more. This student is guilty. She vaguely sensed that this elder's attitude towards Scarlet Heaven Sword seemed to be a little different from the other elders. Elder Bo Yan, and even Elder Xu Feng, who had personally gone to snatch Scarlet Heaven Sword back then, didn't seem to know so much about Scarlet Heaven Sword. Is it tempering its soul? Shang Yusen's next words surprised Chu Luiyue. But on second thought, the other party was a blacksmith in the first place, and his rank wasn't too low either. It wasn't too surprising that he would be able to see through it with a single glance. Elder's insight is truly admirable. You don't have to flatter me. To be honest, I am much more familiar with this Scarlet Heaven Sword than you are. Unfortunately, he was not fated to do so. Since the venerable artifact could recognize a new owner, it meant that there was no artifact soul inside. Thinking back to what Bo Yin had told him before, he could more or less guess what was going on. The sword soul had been transferred to the venerable divine artifact that lacked an artifact soul, forcing it to recognize him as its master. Such a situation was 1 in a million, but it really happened. This really made it impossible for anyone to be jealous. Why are you still standing here? Why aren't you going up? Shang Yusen shot a disdainful glance at Chu Luiyue. Don't tell me you can't even do this? Chu Luiyue was stunned for a moment before he realized that he was urging him. Didn't he want to teach him a lesson just a moment ago? Why did he suddenly seem so supportive now? Elder, you don't mind? Chu Luiyue asked tentatively. Why are you being so wishy-washy? If I mind, didn't you already take Tianlei away? Shang Yusen simply wanted to take action. This kid looked quite smart. But why was he so stupid at the critical moment? The yuan instrument that he wanted to refine was already damaged and could not be salvaged. There was no use in regretting it. On the other hand, the Scarlet Heaven Sword was at an extremely important juncture. If any problems occurred during the process of refining the artifact's soul, it could lead to failure. Why aren't you going? Are you going to watch such a treasure be destroyed? Shang Yusen finally could not hold back. He grabbed Chu Luiyue's shoulder and pushed him hard. Hurry up and go. Chu Luiyue did not hesitate anymore. Thank you, Elder. With that, he tapped his toes and quickly flew toward the top of the mountain. Shang Yusen raised his head to take a look. The number of Tianlei in the sky was decreasing. Those were all summoned when he wanted to refine the artifact. The process was interrupted, so the rest naturally did not appear. The previous ones were consumed extremely quickly. At this time, only half of them were left. However, until now there was still no big movement on the Scarlet Heaven Sword. This also meant that there was still a long way to go before it could refine the artifact's soul. Shang Yusen looked for a while, and could not help but snort coldly. I still have to do it. Troublesome. With that, he stomped heavily on the ground and soared into the sky. Chu Luiyue rushed to the top of the mountain. The Scarlet Heaven Sword was floating in mid-air. Nearly 2/3 of the golden patterns on the scabbard had already appeared. However, the aura around the sword seemed to have become much more chaotic, and there was a faint tendency for it to go berserk. Girl, you must hold this sword well. If you don't control it well, the artifact's soul might be unable to suppress it and cause the entire process to fail. Although Taizu's voice was weak, it was exceptionally serious. Although this was not refining artifacts, it was extremely difficult to refine the artifact's soul of a venerable artifact. Chu Luiyue nodded. I know. She held her breath and stepped forward. Passing through the countless flashing lightning, she held the Scarlet Heaven Sword in her hand again. Then, she continued to pour her force into it. The effect was immediate. Soon, the violent aura around the Scarlet Heaven sword calmed down again. That familiar and subtle feeling of connection was gradually increasing. All of a sudden, Tuanzi ran out of her body and plunged into the spring below. Splash! Chulua looked down. Ripples appeared on the calm water surface, but she could still see countless Tianlei swimming crazily in it. Boom! Another loud sound was heard. Chulua was shocked and quickly looked up. She saw that several Tianlei had appeared in the sky that had gradually calmed down. Between heaven and earth, wind and thunder rumbled. A figure stood in the air. It was Shang Yusen. His clothes fluttered and his sleeves waved. The aura around him surged crazily, and his might was impressive. As he did this, more and more Tianlei appeared in the sky. Chulua instantly understood. He was helping her to trigger the Tianlei. Chulua's heart was filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Elder." Shang Yusen did not even turn his head and shouted, "What are you thanking me for? Focus on refining the artifact's soul. If you fail, I'll teach you a lesson." He had spent so much effort to help, and he would not allow failure. Chulua could not help but smile. Without saying anything else, she retracted her gaze and focused all her attention on the Scarlet Heaven sword. Finally, the scabbard loosened a little. Chulua's heart skipped a beat, and she gripped the hilt tightly. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1245. At this time, the entire top of Thousand Wine Mountain was enveloped by a dazzling silver Tianlei. Amidst the rumbling of the flames, it was almost impossible to see the situation inside. One could only vaguely see Shang Yusen floating in the air. As for the place where the heavenly lightning gathered, only a slender figure could be vaguely seen. Seeing this scene, Rongxiu stopped not far away. He had originally planned to help, but since someone had made a move first, he would just wait and see. It seemed that everything was going smoothly. However, this harmonious scene was quickly broken, because someone else had come. Elder Ouyang had heard that Shang Yusen had come out of seclusion and was planning to refine weapons at Thousand Wine Mountain at night, so he wanted to come and take a look. However, as soon as he stepped into the barrier, he realized that something was wrong. This fluctuation was too shocking. He looked up almost immediately and was stunned by the scene in front of him. Tianlei kept striking down, but it was not aimed at Shang Yusen. However, Shang Yusen, who was standing in the air, was indeed triggering Tianlei. What's going on? Elder Ouyang wanted to go forward without saying anything. Suddenly, a figure appeared from the side and blocked his path. Elder Ouyang, please wait. The deep and familiar voice stunned Elder Ouyang. When he saw the person in front of him clearly, his eyes widened in shock. Rongxiu, why are you here? Rongxiu smiled. I just arrived too. I'm waiting for someone. Elder Ouyang looked at the top of the mountain suspiciously. Who are you waiting for? There was no point in lying at this time. Anyway, he would find out in the end, so Rongxiu was very honest. Chuyu. Chuyu. Elder Ouyang's eyelids twitched. He was very familiar with this name. Wasn't this the kid who had just caused a ruckus here a while ago? He reacted for a moment, and his expression became extremely interesting. He pointed at the blurry figure on the top of the mountain in disbelief. You mean that's Chuyu? Rongxiu nodded and explained in a gentle voice. She's busy right now and shouldn't be distracted. Elder Ouyang, please be considerate and go there later. Elder Ouyang, do you have something to do? On this Thousand Wine Mountain, there was so much Tianlei. Wasn't it obvious what that kid was busy with? What is he doing now? Elder Ouyang was so agitated that he started to stutter. Oh right, and that guy Shang Yusen, what is he doing now? Chuyu's absurdity was one thing, but why did Shang Yusen seem to be helping? Elder Ouyang was confused. He was in a bad mood. You can ask them when they come down, said Rongxiu with a smile. Elder Ouyang was also a weapon refiner, so he naturally understood that outsiders should not disturb them at this time. Otherwise, if something really happened, it would be hard to salvage the situation. Therefore, even if he felt that this scene was very strange, he could only suppress his anger and wait. This kid was punished once because he stayed in Thousand Wine Mountain during the forbidden time. Logically speaking, he shouldn't do it again in a short period of time. Today he appeared again. Did he not learn his lesson, or did you embolden him? Elder Ouyang looked at Rong Xiao suspiciously. A faint light flashed across Rong Xiao's deep eyes, and his thin lips curled slightly. Nothing can escape Elder Ouyang's eyes. It's really you. Elder Ouyang flicked his sleeves. Previously, they said that you valued this Chuyu very much, but I didn't take it seriously. Now it seems that it's true. If it was an ordinary person, Rong Xiao would never have brought him to Thousand Wine Mountain at this time. Seeing Rong Xiao smiling without saying anything, Elder Ouyang couldn't help but raise his voice. Rong Xiao, it's true that you can come and go here at will, but that kid can't. Don't think that Chuyu can escape punishment with your help. Not only did he knowingly break the law, but he also did it again and again. If he didn't teach him a profound lesson this time, he would really be lawless in the future. Rong Xiao thought that if the punishment was still in Guanpengmin Mountain, she would probably be very happy to hear it. But he still had to give her face. So he seemed to nod in agreement. Elder Ouyang is right. Elder Ouyang was depressed when he saw that Chuyu was stubborn and unmoved by force or persuasion. Chuyu was obviously not very old, but he was very shrewd and thoughtful. Even at his age, he couldn't see through Rong Xiao's thoughts. Just like now, Rong Xiao made it clear that he was on Chuyu's side. Not only did he bring Chuyu in during the forbidden time, but he also allowed him to do so on the top of the mountain. The mouth of the spring was right there. But Rong Xiao's behavior made it impossible for him to really get angry. Because he was Rong Xiao. Elder Ouyang glared at him. It's not wrong for you to protect that Chuyu, but you have to make it clear to me first. What is that kid doing up there now? Rong Xiao paused. Now he's holding the divine weapon that appeared in the Dark Feathers Abyss. Elder Ouyang was stunned for a moment, but he immediately understood. The weapon's soul. That divine weapon was not ordinary. So of course he had heard about it. It was just that he was too excited just now to remember it in time. But now that Rong Xiao reminded him, he immediately understood. Chuyu was going to refine the weapon's soul for that divine weapon. No wonder. She couldn't even trigger the heavenly lightning with her own strength. So why didn't she come here? Shang Yusin also had a problem, but he was still doing his best to help. He still hasn't changed his mind about that thing. Elder Ouyang rolled his eyes. Even if he thought with his toes, he knew that Shang Yusin was definitely going for that divine weapon. Boom, boom, boom. Another earth-shattering sound. The entire Thousand Wine Mountain was as bright as day. As those Tianlei continued to fall, the golden patterns on Scarlet Heaven sword gradually appeared after being refined over and over again. Chu Luiyue held the sword hilt tightly with both hands, held his breath, and stared at the scabbard. Finally, the last pattern lit up. Swoosh. The eyes of the dragon head on the sword hilt suddenly burned with flames. One gold, one blue. It was like a dragon that had been sleeping for a long time had finally woken up. Roar. The dragon's roar roared. It resounded throughout the world. Chu Luiyue gritted his teeth and pulled the sword hilt with all his might. Clang. The sword body finally separated from the scabbard. At this moment, all the Tianlei in the sky suddenly fell together. Shang Yusin's heart skipped a beat. There was not enough Tianlei. He immediately turned around and shouted at Elder Ouyang. Ouyang, don't waste your breath. Come up and help. Elder Ouyang was stunned for a moment. Is he calling me? Shang Yusin raised his voice. Hurry up. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1246. The corner of Elder Ouyang's mouth twitched. It was fine that Shang Yusin wanted to help Chuyu, but now he was calling him over? What was going on? But looking at the situation in the sky, it was indeed very urgent. Elder Ouyang clenched his fists. Helping you this time. I'll get it back later. After saying that, he finally moved and rushed into the air. On the top of the mountain, Chu Liyue's figure was already covered by countless Tianlei, and could not be seen at all. The night sky was dark, and all the Tianlei had just struck down. But the artifact's soul was obviously not completed yet, and he had to continue to attract more Tianlei. Elder Ouyang stood in the air with his hands crossed in front of him. An astonishing aura instantly enveloped him. Swish! He pointed to the sky. Soon, a loud sound came from the layers of rolling dark clouds. A silver Tianlei appeared again. With this one, the appearance of the heavenly lightning after that became logical. After a while, the sky was once again illuminated by several intertwined Tianlei. Only then did Shang Yusin finally heave a sigh of relief. If he was a little later, he was afraid that he would not be able to make it. The closer it was to the end, the more he could not relax. He looked down and couldn't help but murmur. This kid, so many Tianlei. How did he get through it? Wasn't Chu Yu only a rank 7 warrior now? Even if these Tianlei went straight for the artifact, he would be more or less affected by it if he stood next to it. Moreover, he was the new owner of Scarlet Heaven's sword, and was responsible for guiding these forces to temper its soul. The consumption of his strength and spirit was also extremely terrifying. If it were other cultivators of the same level, they would have already fallen to the ground. But Chu Yu seemed to be very stable from the beginning to the end. I heard that he even defeated a rank 8 warrior some time ago as a rank 7 warrior. No wonder Elder Meng was so concerned. At first, he didn't take Chu Yu too seriously, and only thought that he was a little kid who knew how to cause trouble, and was a little smart. But it wasn't until now that he realized that this Chu Yu did have some ability. The dragon roared. The powerful pressure almost made Chu Liyue breathless. She madly circulated the force in her body, and slowly pulled out the sword. From the part of it that had appeared, it could be seen that it was a silver sword. It was about 3 fingers wide, with 2 sharp edges and a thick middle. Just by looking at it, one could clearly feel the sharp and cold aura coming from it. Chu Liyue's heart was beating violently, and all he could hear was the sound of his blood flowing. Even though he had not completely drawn it out, Chu Liyue was already certain that this red cloud sword was more than 100 times stronger than the Long Yuan sword. That was an incomparable power. Occasionally, there would be some silver heavenly lightning flashing across it. However, the power of Tianlei, which was originally filled with a powerful aura, would be instantly devoured or annihilated the moment it landed on the sword. In front of Scarlet Heaven, even Tianlei paled in comparison. Chu Liyue could no longer remember how many Tianlei it had digested. However, as time passed, she gradually felt that something seemed to be condensing in Scarlet Heaven's sword, and the subtle connection between it and her became stronger and stronger. It was so strong that, at this moment, she could even faintly sense how much power Tianlei had been devoured by Scarlet Heaven's sword. A venerable artifact, seizing the power of endless Tianlei, tempering the artifact's soul. From this one could see how powerful it was. At this moment, the few people on Thousand Wine Mountain were focused on Scarlet Heaven's sword. However, not far below Chu Liyue, some strange changes were also happening in the small spring. The calm water rippled slightly, and countless silver Tianlei gathered under the water, swimming and interweaving. A red figure was buried in it. It was Dumpling. The surrounding heavenly lightning continued to wander around its body, and the aura on its body was also quietly changing. Scarlet Heaven's sword was consuming Tianlei faster and faster. Not long after, Elder Ouyang noticed that the number of Tianlei in the sky was decreasing. He couldn't help but look back. Why is it so difficult to temper the artifact's soul with this thing? The speed at which he attracted Tianlei couldn't keep up with the speed at which it was devouring. Shang Yusin also noticed this situation and couldn't help but frown. Scarlet Heaven's sword was more powerful than he had expected. It needed more Tianlei to continuously temper it. But now, he was already an arrow at the end of its flight, and Ouyang's situation might not be any better. Perhaps, even if the two of them tried their best, it still wouldn't be enough. At this moment, a tall and slender figure silently appeared in midair. Rongxiu glanced at the sky. His expression was very calm. Then he gently raised his hand. Boom! Almost in the blink of an eye, several Tianlei quickly gathered behind the clouds. These Tianlei didn't hesitate at all and slashed straight down. In an instant, it was as if silver swords were raining down. Elder Ouyang and Shang Yusin both looked back in shock. Damn it, when did Rongxiu become so strong? Shang Yusin couldn't help but curse. Elder Ouyang also swallowed his saliva with difficulty. How would I know? It had only been a few years, and Rong Xiu had already broken through to such a level? At this moment, Chu Luiyue finally completely pulled Scarlet Heaven sword out of its scabbard. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1247. The moment the long sword was unsheathed, there seemed to be a layer of invisible barrier shattering. An aura that seemed to come from a distant time and space instantly rushed out of the Scarlet Heaven sword and entered Chu Luiyue's body. It was as if there was a thread connecting her to the Scarlet Heaven sword. The Scarlet Heaven sword, which was originally extremely heavy, suddenly became as light as a feather at this moment. Chu Luiyue's previous internal injuries also began to rapidly recover under the nourishment of this vast and gentle power. That aura was familiar, but also unfamiliar. It was familiar because it was mixed with the power of the sword soul of the Dragon Abyss sword. Vaguely, it also seemed to have the aura of Taizu. As for the unfamiliar, that was the original power of the Scarlet Heaven sword. She looked at the Scarlet Heaven sword in her hand, and something seemed to surge in her heart. In the next moment she swung her sword. A terrifying sword chi swept forward. After a short silence, a large number of trees in front of her were cut in half. When those trees fell together, Chu Luiyue realized what had happened and couldn't help but widen her eyes slightly. She just wanted to give it a try subconsciously. It was just a light wave, but how could it produce such a terrifying power? At a glance, all the trees that could be seen had been silently cut down. But this was not the end, because these trees were unable to block this sword chi. Therefore, after it swept through the lush forest, its speed did not decrease at all, and it headed straight for the barrier of the Thousand Wine Mountain. Stop it! Elder Ouyang was shocked and hurriedly shouted. Shang Yusin was about to move when he saw a figure flash past his eyes. It was Rong Xiu. He raised his wrist, and a golden stream of light flew out quickly. Boom! The speed of this force was extremely fast. It caught up from behind, and finally managed to stop the sword chi before it could hit the barrier. The two forces collided fiercely and produced an explosive sound. The barrier was impacted by the aftershock and shook violently. Elder Ouyang trembled with fear when he saw this. He hurriedly rushed over. He often came to the Thousand Wine Mountain, so he was very familiar with this and quickly strengthened the barrier. After confirming that the barrier was no longer in danger of being damaged, he let out a long sigh of relief. If the barrier was broken, everyone would know what had happened on Thousand Wine Mountain. It wouldn't be good if things got out of hand. Thinking of this, he became angry again. He raised his eyebrows and glared at Chu Luiyue, grinding his teeth. Chu, you better give me an explanation. Chu Luiyue touched his nose and carefully put away the Scarlet Heaven sword. With a thought, Scarlet Heaven sword directly went to her dantian. In this way, she could still clearly sense all the movements on Scarlet Heaven sword. This made her believe that Scarlet Heaven sword's soul had been completely tempered, and it had indeed completely recognized her as its master. Her heart, which had been hanging in the air, was finally at ease. The most important matter had been resolved. Next, it was time to deal with the subsequent troubles. She looked at Elder Ouyang with a helpless expression, but her eyes were clear. Elder Ouyang, I know I was wrong. No matter what, it was always good to admit his mistake first. However, Elder Ouyang already had experience, so he did not fall for her trick at all. With one hand behind his back, he snorted coldly. You know you were wrong. This old man didn't see it at all. Chu, this is not the first time you broke the rules and barged into Thousand Wine Mountain, right? This old man remembers that it has only been a month since you were locked up in Pengmin Mountain for 10 days. Not to mention that you were also locked up in the middle of the month because of other mistakes. What, are you uncomfortable if you don't cause trouble for a day? Elder Ouyang said angrily. You really don't learn from your mistakes. Chu Luiyue waited for him to scold her before explaining herself in a low voice. Elder Ouyang, this student really didn't mean it. You also saw the situation just now. That divine weapon needs to be tempered, so this student can only come here. And after coming here, it directly went out of control, which led to the following things. Don't give me that. Elder Ouyang irritably interrupted Chu Liyue's words, and only felt a headache. Don't you know what level of strength you have now? You actually want to use your own strength to temper the soul of this divine weapon now. Do you think that you have been living too well during this period of time? Or are you really not afraid of death? If something really happened, no one would be able to help her. Chu Liyue heaved a sigh of relief in her heart. Although Elder Ouyang's words were harsh, he still considered her in his heart. Moreover, if he really didn't like her, he wouldn't have helped her without reservation just now. In the end, he still had a sharp tongue but a soft heart. Chu Liyue smiled at Elder Ouyang. Isn't this student fine? Elder, although the student is young and inexperienced, I also know that life is precious, and I don't dare to joke about this kind of thing. If he really didn't have the slightest confidence and urged her to come, she wouldn't have agreed. Elder Ouyang choked. What she said was not without reason. After all, whoever obtained such a treasure would not think too much about it. But it was still too dangerous. What, do you think that with Rong Xiu around, you will be safe? Chu Liyue was silent for a moment and nodded seriously. Yes, you. Elder Ouyang felt even more choked. Rong Xiu's lips slightly curved into a perfect arc, and he chuckled. Elder Ouyang, since I brought her here, I will naturally bring her back in one piece. You. Elder Ouyang flicked his sleeve. This interrogation couldn't continue. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1248. Elder Ouyang couldn't ask the two of them anymore, so he simply changed his target. Shang Yusen, what's wrong with you? Rong Xiu was fooling around with Chu Yu. Who was he? How could he help the tyrant? But Shang Yusen was really not afraid of Elder Ouyang. Hearing this, he crossed his arms and said lazily, Didn't you see it just now? Help him. Didn't you see what he's holding in his hand? He had been thinking about Scarlet Heaven's sword for many years, but he couldn't see it. Now that he finally had the chance, it had already recognized Chu Yu as its master. Of course he was unwilling. But what could he do? A divine weapon of this level would not easily recognize a master. Even if he had been thinking about it for many years, he didn't dare to have such extravagant hopes. From the beginning to the end, he was just thinking about waiting for Scarlet Heaven's sword to be born. After it was brought back to the academy, he could seize the opportunity to observe and study it closely. Now it had become Chu Yu's divine weapon. Other than the word opportunity, there was no other way to describe it. Chu Yu wanted to refine the weapon's soul for it. How could he just watch and ignore it? After all, he had been thinking about it for many years, so he still had some thoughts in his heart. Even if it wasn't for Chu Yu, he had to do it for Scarlet Heaven's sword. Elder Ouyang felt uncomfortable all over. He closed his eyes and held his forehead with a headache. None of them were easy to deal with. However, it just so happened that these people were all eloquent, making it extremely difficult for him to even refute. Ouyang, there's no point in asking this now. Shang Yusen touched his chin. Didn't you participate just now, Elder Ouyang? If it wasn't for Shang Yusen urging him, would he have done this? It was his fault for being muddle-headed at that time. He actually helped. What you mean is that we're all in the same boat now. Shang Yusen looked at him strangely with an expression that said, Aren't you talking nonsense? Elder Ouyang's eyebrows twitched violently. He felt that it was wrong for him to even think about communicating with them. Shang Yusen, he was not in the academy all year round. Whenever he came back, he would go into seclusion to cultivate. He had always been carefree and did things according to his mood. Rong Xiu, one of the most outstanding geniuses in the academy. His position in the academy was extremely high, and he had even more privileges than some of the elders. Chu Yu, there was nothing much to say about this. He was just an audacious brat. You've even taught me, and made mistakes again. Elder Ouyang took a deep breath, and tried to calm himself down. Shang Yusen, Bo Yin will know about what happened tonight sooner or later. Shang Yusen nodded. Of course he would know. The profound formation at the foot of the Thousand Wine Mountain and the surrounding barrier still had a portion of his power. However, this is nothing. He already knew that Scarlet Heaven Sword was in Chu Yu's hands. Refining the artifact's soul, could it still be considered a mistake? If it was in my hands, I would have done the same, Shang Yusen said indifferently with a regretful expression. Unfortunately, I'm not that lucky. As he spoke, he looked at Chu Luiyue. I've helped you today. How about lending this Scarlet Heaven Sword to me for a day? Chu Luiyue already knew that he had been concerned about Scarlet Heaven Sword for many years, so she nodded very straightforwardly. Chu Yu will naturally repay Elder's kindness with gusto. Whenever you want it, just tell me. In any case, Scarlet Heaven Sword had already completely become hers. No one else could forcefully take it away from her, so there was nothing to worry about. Seeing that she was so straightforward, Shang Yusen instantly appreciated her a little more. Ha ha ha. Good. Just based on your words, I didn't help you for nothing today. As he spoke, he was so excited that he even reached out his hand, wanting to pat Chu Luiyue's shoulder. Rong Xiu silently took a step forward and stood between the two of them, preventing Shang Yusen's fan-like palm from landing on him. Elder Ouyang, I actually brought junior brother Chu Yu here today. Everything happened because of me. I am willing to take all responsibility for this matter. Rong Xiu. Elder Ouyang had long expected that Rong Xiu would stand up for him, but when he really heard him say so, he couldn't help but be surprised. He really didn't understand why Rong Xiu was so protective of Chu Yu, but it had to be said that with Rong Xiu's appearance, this matter wouldn't be too serious. He took a deep look at Rong Xiu, shook his head and sighed. You haven't set foot here for a few years. I never expected that this time, you actually. Halfway through his words he stopped, as if he wanted to say something but hesitated. Rong Xiu's expression was the same as usual, and he smiled faintly. I haven't had time to thank you for today's matter. Elder Ouyang completely lost his temper. He looked around and furrowed his brows. On the top of the mountain, it was a mess. Countless mountains and forests had collapsed. Because of the bombardment of countless Tianlei, large patches of black appeared on the mountain rocks, and some even had deep cracks. It wasn't difficult for anyone to guess what had happened here. It seems that Wine Mountain has to be closed for a while. It would take a lot of effort to repair it. In the sky, the dark clouds gradually dissipated. It was already early in the morning. An array of white appeared on the horizon. It seemed that it would be daybreak soon. Let's go. Let's go see Bo Yin together. Elder Ouyang let out a long breath and took the lead to leave. Chu Luiyue turned back to look at the spring. Dumpling was still inside. She opened her mouth and was about to shout when a thought suddenly flashed through her mind. Kid, what are you looking at? Hurry up and follow. Elder Ouyang urged from the front. Chu Luiyue retracted her gaze. I'm coming. Her figure flashed, and she left with him, never looking back. In the spring at the top of the mountain, a ripple flashed across and disappeared in an instant. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1249. Donghuang Clock Tower. In the solemn hall, the air seemed to have frozen. Elder Bo Yin sat at the top without any expression on his face. Only his slightly clenched fist showed that he was not as calm as he appeared to be. In front of him stood the 4 people who just came out of Thousand Wine Mountain. That's the gist of it. Elder Ouyang explained the cause and effect of the incident, and his mouth was almost dry from all the talking. After that, the hall fell into dead silence again. After a while, Elder Bo Yin spoke slowly. So, you rushed here early in the morning because you guys destroyed half of Thousand Wine Mountain? Shang Yusen could not help but remind him, mainly to help Chu Yu refine Scarlet Cloud Sword soul. The soul? Cough, it's just that some trees and rocks were destroyed then. The spring is still fine. He did not say the last sentence, and even the words he said before became much softer under Elder Bo Yan's gaze. Those who knew Elder Bo Yin knew that he was rarely angry, but once he was angry, it was extremely difficult to deal with. Even Shang Yusen and Elder Ouyang, who had worked with him for many years, felt a chill. Chu Yu, in that case this matter was still caused by you? Chu Luiyue's shoulders drooped, and he lowered his head slightly. This student was rash and made a big mistake. Elder Bo Yin, please punish me. Of course you should be punished. Elder Bo Yin really did not know what to say. This Chuyu, just when I thought he would be obedient and stop, he kept causing new problems. And each time, it was more serious than the last. This time, he even implicated Shang Yusin and Ouyang. Right, there was also Rong Xiao. Elder Bo Yin, if I did not take the initiative today, junior brother Chu you would definitely not go to Thousand Wine Mountain. Rong Xiao's tone was calm, but also very sincere. I promised you before that I would teach junior brother Chu you well. So now the person who should be punished is me. Elder Bo Yin was so angry that he laughed. You think I won't punish you? You can't get away with this matter. Rong Xiao, if you want to take on everything, you have to see if it's feasible. And if you can take on the responsibility. His gaze swept across the few of them. None of you can escape. What kind of place was the Thousand Wine Mountain? It's fine if Chuyu doesn't know, but the remaining three are very clear. Under such circumstances, they actually dared to do such a thing. They were simply trying to overturn the heavens. The four of them quieted down. Even Shang Yusin had lost his temper, and stood there obediently. Elder Bo Yin closed his eyes. Who else knows about this? Elder Ouyang said. Apart from the people in the hall, no one else knows. In other words, only Elder Bo Yin had received the news. This made Elder Bo Yin relax a little. If things got out of hand, it wouldn't be easy to clean up the mess. He fell into deep thought, and began to consider how to punish these people. Time seemed to pass extremely slowly. Since Elder Bo Yin did not speak, the remaining four also remained silent. Finally, after a long while, Elder Bo Yin raised his head and looked at Chu Luyue. Chuyu, student is here. That artifact spirit has been refined successfully. Elder, it's done. Elder Bo Yin nodded. Although this matter was ridiculous, it wasn't completely fruitless. That divine artifact had already become Chuyu's, and no one could snatch it away. Now that he was able to refine the artifact's spirit and merge with it, it could be considered a fortunate thing. Although no one said anything about the divine artifact recognizing Chuyu as its master. But in reality, there were quite a number of elders who were in the know who were extremely unhappy. In order to take back this artifact, the academy had prepared for a long time, and put in a lot of effort. But in the end, it was taken by a new student who had just entered the academy for 2 months. Of course, they wouldn't be happy about it. But because this matter had already happened and couldn't be changed, they could only accept it. Only when Chuyu took out his strength to prove himself, would he be able to convince those people. Elder Bo Yin actually thought highly of Chuyu, and because of this he gave him chances time and time again. Even if Chuyu had violated the rules a few times, he still stood on Chuyu's side. This time, Chuyu had gone overboard, but he couldn't really do anything to him. After thinking about it for a long time, the only good news was that he had managed to refine a weapon soul. Elder Bo Yin comforted himself as he waved at Chu Luyue. Alright, you can go back first. Later, I will discuss with your master, and see what kind of punishment we should give you. Chu Luyue's thoughts moved slightly, and she instantly guessed that Elder Bo Yin had something to say to the other three, so she tactfully took her leave. Yes, she bowed, then quickly turned and left the hall. Her actions were clean and tidy, without the slightest bit of sloppiness, until her figure completely disappeared outside the door. Elder Bo Yin then looked at the remaining 3 people in front of him. His brows slowly creased, and his voice became more serious. This time, did it involve the spring eye? No, Elder Ouyang immediately said. At that time, all of us were above the mountain peak, and there was still some distance from the spring eye. In fact, the Tianlei had been swallowed by the Scarlet Heaven Sword, and other than some remnant energy waves that caused some damage to the surroundings, everything else was fine. Of course, this was ignoring Chuyu's last unconscious strike. That's good. However, I will still personally check it later, Elder Bo Yin said. Regarding this, the 3 of them had no objections. The spring eye was of great importance, and it was normal for Elder Bo Yin to be so cautious. This matter must be kept a secret, and no one else can know about it. If one more person knew, it would be more troublesome. Although your actions today were pardonable, however, this punishment cannot be avoided. Elder Bo Yin looked at the three of them. Think about it yourselves. What should we do about this? The sky gradually brightened. When Chu Luyue walked out of the Donghuang Bell Tower, it was already morning. However, there were not many people in the Qingming Square at this time, so no one saw her walk out. Chu Luyue looked back at the closed door, pursed her lips, and then turned to leave, heading straight for Jiuheng Mountain. When Chu Luyue returned to Jiuheng Mountain, she felt that something was wrong the moment she landed. She paused for a moment but still walked forward. When she opened the door, she saw a familiar face. Dugama Bao was sitting upright, and when he heard the sound he looked up. Debao dash, Chu Luyue called out to him. But when she met that pair of demonic purple eyes, she inexplicably felt a little guilty. Dugama Bao just looked at her quietly. You went to Thousand Wine Mountain during the ban again? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from LoveNet. Chapter 1250. Chu Luyue sighed in her heart. She knew that nothing could be hidden from him. Dugama Bao seemed to have countless pairs of eyes in the academy. No matter what happened, he could always quickly and clearly understand it. Chu Luyue had long felt that this matter was too strange, but she had never been able to get an answer. Just like now, last night on Thousand Wine Mountain, there were indeed only the four of them. With the protection and concealment of the barrier outside the mountain, no one outside knew about it. Logically speaking, other than the four of them, Elder Bo Yin should be the only one who knew about this. And they were the ones who took the initiative to confess to Elder Bo Yin. Dugama Bao's guess was so accurate. It really didn't make sense. Yes, Chu Luyue chose to tell the truth. She didn't think that she had the ability to deceive Dugama Bao. Dugama Bao frowned slightly, and the look in his eyes became dangerous. Have you forgotten what I told you before? Of course, Chu Luyue didn't forget. At that time, it was because Dugama Bao made it clear that she was not allowed to enter Thousand Wine Mountain at that time, that she obediently obeyed until now. Even if Dumpling stared at the spring and refused to leave every time, she never stayed there for too long. The situation today is indeed a little special, Chu Luyue explained helplessly. I went to refine my weapon soul. Dugama Bao snorted and turned his head away. Even if you don't go to Thousand Wine Mountain, there are other ways. There are many mountains where the weapon refiners are, and there are a few of them overseeing it. It's the same if you go to them. Why do you have to do this? Chu Luyue's eyelids twitched. Debao, do you think that I can take this path? Since the first day she entered the academy, she had already heard many rumors about the weapon refiners. They were arrogant, unsociable, cold, and rarely came out even once in a year. She didn't even have enough time to admire them. How could they think of such a solution? Although she was bold and occasionally acted presumptuously, it didn't mean that she didn't know her limits. Dugama Bao choked. Of course you. His voice stopped abruptly, and a complicated emotion flashed through his eyes. Chu Luyue did not see the change in his expression clearly, but she could tell that something was amiss with his tone. She could not help but ask curiously, Of course, what's wrong with me? Dugama Bao closed his eyes. When he opened them again, his eyes had regained their clarity. It's nothing. I was careless. Chu Luyue frowned slightly. She still felt that Dugama Bao's answer was a little strange, but she couldn't put her finger on it. Even if you can't do it, Rong Xiu can. However, he brought you directly to Thousand Wine Mountain. Humph. Dugama Bao sneered. Rong Xiu thought that the situation was not chaotic enough. Chu Luyue lowered her eyes slightly and didn't reply. She hadn't thought of this before, but Rong Xiu was the number one on the Green Cloud ranking. How could she have forgotten about this? Judging from the polite attitude of the elders in the academy towards Rong Xiu, if he personally came forward, it might not be impossible to invite him, however. Just as Dugama Bao said, he didn't do so. However, this was understandable. After all, it was best not to owe favors. Relatively speaking, it was much more troublesome to ask those senior refiners for help than to go to Thousand Wine Mountain directly. Even though Rong Xiu might face quite a bit of punishment if he chose the latter, Rong Xiu definitely had his own considerations before he made this choice. Chu Luyue thought for a moment, then walked over with an earnest smile. Dabao, don't be angry. This matter is already in the past, isn't it? Not only did I come back safely, but I also successfully tempered the weapon's soul. Even if I receive a little punishment, the benefits definitely outweigh the disadvantages. Mabao didn't say anything. How was he going to explain to her that he wasn't just worried about this? After pausing for a moment, Mabao finally shook his head. If there's a next time, I won't let you off. Chuluiwa smiled, her eyes curved. All right. Mabao's gaze swept across her face, opened his mouth and finally said, since the weapon's soul has been tempered, you should study and cultivate more. There are very few venerable artifacts in the world. It's a great honor for you to be able to obtain one. You must cultivate well. Chuluiwa nodded vigorously. Definitely. After spending so much effort, if she couldn't make the best use of it, wouldn't it be a huge loss? Mabao nodded, and immediately stood up to leave. Chuluiwa couldn't help but say, Dabao, are you leaving now? Aren't you going to stay a little longer? Mabao stopped in his tracks. I'll be back in the evening. Chuluiwa frowned slightly. Ever since they came to Lingxiao College, she almost never spent too much time with Mabao during the day. His daily training was also held between evening and night. It was as if he had other important things to do at other times. But in the Lingxiao Academy, what kind of things did he need to do every day? Dabao, when you're not with me, where are you? Chuluiwa finally couldn't help but ask. If I want to look for you, I don't even know where to go. Mabao turned around and glanced at her, his face expressionless. He said calmly, you don't have to look for me. If you're in trouble in the college, I'll rush over. After saying that, he directly lifted his feet and left. Chuluiwa's frown deepened. Dabao, what secret was he hiding? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1251. Chuluiwa stayed anxiously in her residence for a while. In the afternoon, news came from the academy. Thousand Wine Mountain would be closed for maintenance for a month. The students were very surprised. After all, although Thousand Wine Mountain had a ban every day, it had never been closed for a month. Everyone was discussing this and coming up with all sorts of guesses. But in reality, even many elders were confused about this. It was still fine yesterday, but today, it was inexplicably going into seclusion for quite some time. It was really strange. But many elders knew that Thousand Wine Mountain was not an ordinary place, so they did not ask much. Although the students regretted that they lost a place to relax, it was only for a month, so they accepted it naturally. Of course, it was meaningless if they did not accept it. Chuluiwa wanted to go out for a walk, and then go to Thousand Wine Mountain to see Dumpling. But after thinking about it, she gave up. Now, she could only hope that Dumpling could safely pass the month in Thousand Wine Mountain. After temporarily putting this matter aside, Chuluiwa began to wait for Rongxiu to return. At the same time, she was waiting for the punishment she was about to face. She was not naive enough to think that she could escape. From Elder Bo Yan's reaction, this was the angriest he had ever been, and he would not let it go so easily. One must know that the last time he knew that she had taken the Scarlet Heaven sword for herself, he did not show such an expression. This showed how important Thousand Wine Mountain was. This also made Chuluiwa even more certain that there was a huge secret related to the academy hidden in the spring at the top of Thousand Wine Mountain. Chuluiwa could not think of what the academy would do to her. Although Elder Wanzheng and Rongxiu were helping her, she instinctively felt that her fate would not be good. They waited all the way until nightfall. But the one who returned was not Rongxiu, but Elder Wensi. Chuyu. Elder Wensi stood outside the barrier and placed his green jade token on it. At the same time, he called out Chuluiwa's name. Chuluiwa, who had been waiting quietly in the room, immediately got up and walked out when he heard the noise. She saw Elder Wensi outside the barrier at a glance. At this moment, he was looking at her with a complicated gaze with one hand behind his back. Chuluiwa's heart skipped a beat, and he unconsciously slowed down his steps. Elder Wensi, why are you here? Elder Wensi didn't say anything. He just looked at her like that, as if he was probing, puzzled and conflicted. After a long while he said, Come out first. Oh, Chu Lue said, then walked out of the barrier, and then stood in front of Elder Wensi. Did you get into trouble again? Elder Wensi tried to make his voice sound calm, but in fact, everyone could hear the suppressed emotions in it. Chu Lue hesitated for a moment before nodding. Elder Wensi held his forehead, not knowing what to say. Didn't you just come out from Pengmin Mountain? Why is he causing trouble again? It had been a long time since he saw Bo Yan's expression. What was even more shocking was that this time, it seemed to have implicated Rong Xiu, as well as Shang Yusin and Ouyang. Those two old fellows. You're really getting more and more capable. Tell me, what did you do to make Bo Yan so angry? Chu Lue immediately understood. It seemed that Elder Wensi didn't know about this matter. Although Elder Bo Yan was angry, he still chose to suppress this matter. On one hand, it might be because this matter involved a lot of people, and on the other hand, it might be to protect the secret of Thousand Wine Mountain. But Chu Lue had no way of knowing about this. She pursed her lips and asked carefully, Elder Wensi, Rong Xiu and the others, how are they? You still have the mood to ask them? You can't even protect yourself now. Elder Wensi finally couldn't help but pat the back of Chu Lue's head. But considering that the child was still young and looked pitiful, he couldn't bear to hit her too hard. Chu Lue hissed, holding her head and looking at him pitifully. Elder Wensi's heart softened at first, then he shuddered. Pooey, what pitiful. This kid knew that he was amenable to coaxing but not coercion. So he deliberately looked at him like that. It must be. If he really didn't do anything, why would Bo Yan have such a reaction? Unfortunately, Bo Yan seemed to have made up his mind to block the news, and only told him to bring Chu Yu over, but didn't mention the reason. He could only speculate in his heart. But no matter how he thought about it, he couldn't figure out what this kid did to involve so many powerful people. Elder Wensi felt a chill run down his spine, and looked at Chu Lue warily. This kid, could it be that one day in the future, he would sell him out as well? They will deal with it themselves, you don't have to worry about it. Right now, Wan Zheng is discussing with Bo Yan how to deal with you in the Donghuang Bell Tower. Wan Zheng wants you to be there no matter what, so he asked me to bring you over first. Chu Lue's heart warmed slightly. Elder Wan Zheng should have known about this by now, but he insisted on this request because he was concerned about her. She nodded. Thank you, Elder Wensi. Elder Wensi snorted. Let's go. As the elder who recruited Chu Yu, although he wasn't his master, he still had some responsibility. At first, he only felt happy and excited that he had recruited such a rare genius. But now, why did he feel like he had been cheated? And the longer Chu Yu stayed in the academy, the more obvious this feeling became. Elder Wensi couldn't help but sigh when he thought of this. Why did he have to deal with all these troublesome people? Arriving at the Donghuang Bell Tower again, and entering the hall, Chu Lue clearly felt that the atmosphere was different from before. I've brought him, Elder Wensi said. Chu Lue quickly looked up to take a look. In the huge hall, Elder Bo Yan and Elder Wan Zheng were sitting there. Other than them, Rong Xiu and the other two were no longer there. She retracted her gaze and bowed respectfully. Student Chu Yu greets Elder Bo Yan and Master. Elder Bo Yan gave Elder Wensi a look. Elder Wensi understood tacitly. Then you guys go ahead, I still have something to do, so I'll leave first. With that he turned and left. When his figure completely disappeared outside the door, Chu Lue immediately felt that the atmosphere in the room had become tense. Even the air seemed to have started to condense. Two pairs of eyes that seemed to have materialized landed on her body. It was as if a sharp knife had scraped past her. Chu Yu, Bo Yan said that you caused trouble in Thousand Wine Mountain again, is that true? Elder Wan Zheng asked in a low voice. Chu Lue nodded honestly. Student is at fault. Elder Wan Zheng took a deep breath. Elder Bo Yan snorted. Wan Zheng, he admitted it himself. What else do you want to explain for him? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1252. Elder Wan Zheng coughed and lowered his stance. Ahem. Actually, I'm not trying to defend him. That divine artifact needs to be refined, right? To be honest, he didn't mean to break the rules, But he couldn't. In the end, Elder Wanzhong couldn't finish his last word. Elder Bo Yin sneered. This isn't the first time he's made a mistake. If he doesn't learn his lesson this time in the future. Although Wanzhong felt that what Elder Bo Yin said made sense, the person in front of him was still his disciple. He couldn't bear to punish him too harshly. Not to mention that this child was refining the divine artifact's soul. Now, he was officially in possession of a venerable one-god artifact. He was secretly happy, but he couldn't show it in front of Elder Bo Yin. Yes, this punishment is necessary. Elder Wanzhong agreed. But don't hurt the child's foundation. This was a rare good seedling. If he was hurt, they would be the ones feeling the heartache. Elder Bo Yin had already expected him to say this. Ever since he called Elder Wanzhong over, the two had been arguing on this issue for a long time. How could he not know what Elder Wanzhong was thinking? Elder Bo Yin shook his head helplessly. Wanzhong, if you continue to spoil him like this, something will happen sooner or later. Elder Wanzhong couldn't help but say. In the past, there was no one who could cause more trouble than this child. Back then that girl also. Wanzhong. Elder Bo Yin frowned and immediately shouted at him to stop. Only then did Elder Wanzhong realize that he had said something wrong and fell silent. Chu Liyue's heart skipped a beat. That girl, who? Almost without hesitation, Chu Liyue felt that they were talking about her. She lowered her eyes slightly, hiding the emotions that flashed across her eyes. In fact, during this period of time, she had already remembered a few things. In the past, she was almost considered a tyrant in Lingxiao College. She had done all kinds of tormenting things. She had used up all the precious herbs in the Medicine Wind Valley. One after another, it was simply uncountable. Otherwise, the elders wouldn't still have lingering fears when mentioning her after leaving the college for so long. However, until now, she still couldn't figure out how she had done those things. She didn't even know when she had broken through to the god realm. The room fell silent. Elder Bo Yin calmed himself down and looked at Chu Liyue. Chu Yu, your master loves you dearly and can't bear to punish you. However, this was a serious matter. It would be inappropriate if he was not punished. What do you think? Chu Liyue looked up, his gaze clean and sincere. Student knows his mistake and is willing to bear any punishment. Elder Wanzhong wanted to say something but hesitated. However, seeing how resolute Chu Liyue was, he could only swallow his words. Elder Bo Yan's expression softened. For Chu Yu to have this kind of attitude, it wasn't like he was a rotten wood that couldn't be carved. However, after the previous 2 times, he no longer dared to completely believe that Chu Yu would change his ways. Originally, I discussed with your master to lock you up in Pengmin Mountain for a period of time. Chu Liyue's eyes flickered. However, I did the same thing the previous 2 times, but it didn't seem to have any warning effect on you. Elder Bo Yin could tell that Chu Yu didn't seem to be afraid of this matter at all. If it was someone else, they would have become obedient after going there once. However, Chu Yu wasn't like that at all. Therefore, he felt that this method was useless against Chu Yu. Therefore, this time, I will change to another punishment. Chu Liyue's heart suddenly felt empty. I thought I could go there again. What a pity. She paused and couldn't help but say. Elder Bo Yin, student has made a serious mistake this time, and is willing to accept any punishment. You can lock me up in Pengmin Mountain again. Elder Bo Yin looked at her with a strange expression. Why? Do you really want to go there again? Chu Liyue tactfully stopped this topic. You misunderstood. Student means that student will be willing to accept any punishment you give. Only then did Elder Bo Yin nod in satisfaction. It's good that you have this awareness. As for your punishment, from today onwards, you will be responsible for guarding the Beast Park for a month. Beast Park? A month? Chu Liyue and Elder Wanzhong spoke in unison. The difference was that Chu Liyue didn't know what the Beast Park was. But Elder Wanzhong was shocked that Elder Bo Yin would punish him for a month. Bo Yin, I don't agree. Elder Wanzhong swallowed the vulgarities that were about to come out of his mouth and slammed the table angrily. What kind of place is the Beast Park? You want him to go there for a month? Aren't you sending him to his death? No. This time must be reduced. Elder Bo Yan's expression was calm as he said leisurely. If it was someone else, it would naturally be dangerous. However, don't forget that Chuyu has a contract with the divine beast. Since he has the ability to contract with the red-tailed phoenix, wouldn't he have the ability to guard the beast park for a month? Elder Wanjing choked. That's different. Those beasts in the beast park have always been free-range. They are untamed and violent. Even if some elders went there, they would occasionally get injured, let alone Chuyu? You have too many concerns. Elder Bo Yin shook his head firmly. Chuyu has caused trouble time and time again, but he is very lucky. Last time, under the siege of so many god-level experts, he managed to escape unscathed. This time, when he was refining his weapon spirit, countless Tianlei struck him, but he came out unscathed. I don't think it's enough to say that he is lucky. Chu Luiyue. Elder Wanzheng was speechless. He couldn't help it. After all, he was speaking the truth. In fact, he had been grumbling about this matter for a long time. Chuyu kept causing trouble, but this trouble was not something that ordinary people could cause. That also required some ability. Knowing that there was no room for discussion, Elder Wanzheng hesitated for a long time before agreeing. Let him go. But if he encounters any danger, I will immediately bring him out. As he spoke, he looked at Chu Luiyue and reminded him. Chuyu, if anything goes wrong, immediately use your black jade token to call for help. Master will definitely rush over immediately. Don't force yourself at any time. Do you understand? Chu Luiyue felt a warmth in his heart. Thank you, Master. Elder Wanzheng looked at the young man in front of him. Probably because he had gone through a lot yesterday, he didn't have a good rest today. His face was haggard and his lips were pale. But when he smiled like this, his eyes were clean and his smile was warm. It made people want to smile with him unconsciously. This child could only smile so innocently now. When he found out what kind of place the Beast Park was, he was afraid. Elder Bo Yin stood up. Let's go. We will send you there personally. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1253. Chu Luiyue's brows twitched slightly. She had been imprisoned at Pengmin Mountain twice. The first time, it was Elder Wensi who sent her there. The second time it was Rong Xiao. However, this time, Elder Bo Yin actually planned to send her there personally. What exactly was the place that made him so cautious? Of course, this did not exclude the possibility that Elder Bo Yin could not assign anyone to send her there, in order to prevent the news from spreading. However, judging from Elder Wanzheng's vehement objection, that Beast Park should not be a good place to stay. At the very least, when she was imprisoned at Pengmin Mountain, Elder Wanzheng was never worried about her safety. But this time, Chu Luiyue collected her thoughts and followed closely behind the two of them. The three of them came out of the Donghuang Bell Tower and went straight to the Beast Park. After walking for a while, Chu Luiyue realized that they were heading towards the Xian Master's area. Elder Wanzheng seemed to have seen through her doubts and moved closer to her to explain. Elder Wanzheng said, "The Beast Park is indeed within the Xian Master's area, but it does not belong to them alone. The martial artists and Xian Master's elders will take turns to patrol here." Chu Luiyue nodded. Elder Wanzheng saw that her expression was normal, and thought to himself that this brat still did not know what she was going to face later. He could not help but sigh in his heart. Chu Luiyue saw his worry and thought for a while before asking, "Master, is the Beast Park very dangerous?" Elder Wanzheng paused. "Forget it. You will know when we get there." Chu Luiyue could only suppress her curiosity. After going around the rugged mountains, Chu Luiyue even saw a few high-level Xian formations in the middle. After about an hour, Elder Bo Yin finally stopped. "We're here. The Beast Park is below us." Chu Luiyue took a few steps forward and followed Elder Bo Yan's line of sight. Dozens of mountains stretched endlessly. The trees were lush and white mist drifted in the middle of the mountains. At first glance, it looked like a quiet mountain forest. It was no different from the other places in the academy. However, Chu Luiyue knew that things were not that simple. Because in the sky above this mountain region, there was actually a huge silver profound formation. It floated quietly in the air, covering the entire forest in a translucent state. Through the gaps between the streams of light, One could clearly see the scenery below. However, everyone who stood here could feel the astonishing pressure coming from the profound formation. You would never dare to be impudent. Chu Luiyue held his breath. This Xian formation was definitely one of the best Xian formations she had ever seen in her life. Compared to the Academy's barrier, it was not inferior at all. One had to know that constructing such a Xian formation required the joint efforts of many experts. The amount of manpower and resources consumed was incalculable. To be able to construct such a Xian formation within the Academy, without caring about the cost, it was enough to prove the preciousness of the area under the Xian formation. Chu Luiyue's gaze carefully swept across the profound formation, and he vaguely felt a few obscure yet valiant auras. That should be the elders in charge of patrolling. In the next moment, Elder Bo Yin flew down. Elder Wanzheng patted Chu Luiyue's shoulder. "Let's go." Chu Luiyue nodded and rushed down without hesitation. The three of them stood about 100 meters away from the silver profound formation. Standing there, Chu Luiyue could clearly feel the valiant pressure from the profound formation. I wonder what the situation inside is like, Chu Luiyue thought to himself. Suddenly, an aura rapidly approached. A middle-aged man stepped out from behind the profound formation. "Bo Yin, Wanzheng, why are you guys here?" This man was wearing a white robe. His figure was tall and skinny, and his eyes were sharp. When his gaze swept across them, it made them not dare to move. "Who is this? You guys even brought a brat here?" Elder Bo Yin explained. "This is Chu Yu." After saying that, Chu Luiyue clearly saw a look of understanding flash across the other party's face. It seemed like he had long heard of her great name. Elder Bo Yin raised his chin. "This is Elder Yu Yu." Chu Luiyue inexplicably felt a little embarrassed, but he still bowed respectfully. "Student Chu Yu greets Elder Yu Yu. Chu Yu, this brat, has committed some crimes recently. Wanzheng and I have discussed and decided to throw him here for a month, to let him suffer a little and learn from his mistakes." Elder Bo Yin said very straightforwardly. Elder Yu Yu looked at Chu Luiyue with some surprise. What exactly did he do to end up in such a situation? Bo Yin usually wouldn't casually put someone here, let alone for a month. "How is your current strength?" Elder Yu Yu raised his chin and asked. "Take note, I asked all of it." Chu Luiyue paused and said sincerely. "This student is currently at the middle of the 7th rank, 9th rank Celestial Physician, 9th rank Xian Master." After saying that, the scene fell silent for a moment. The three elders looked at Chu Luiyue in unison. "Chu Yu, when did you break through to the 9th rank of the Xian Master?" Elder Wanzheng couldn't help but ask. Chu Luiyue blinked. "Just not long ago." She originally didn't want to say this, but as a Xian Master, Elder Yu Yu's eyesight was very good. She didn't dare to guarantee that if she lied now, she wouldn't be taught a lesson later. Moreover, from the fact that she could open the Academy's barrier, he could basically guess this. Elder Wanzheng's lips moved, but he didn't say anything. In the end, he glanced at Elder Bo Yin and snorted. "See that? This brat's strength was stronger than they expected." If something really happened to such a rare seedling, he definitely wouldn't let Bo Yin off. "Not bad, you're quite honest." Elder Yu Yu nodded. "Go in." Digression. Remember to watch the pinned event. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1254. Chu Luiyue was stunned. She just went in like that. Elder Yu Yu looked at her strangely. "Why, is there a problem?" Chu Luiyue shook her head. "Seems like this Elder Yu Yu is a swift and decisive person. But this is good too. It saves me a lot of trouble." She took half a step forward and suddenly stopped. She turned back to look at Elder Bo Yin and asked hesitantly, "Elder, I wonder if Senior Rong Xiu and the others, they have their own punishments. You don't have to worry about that." Elder Bo Yin waved his hand. "In this 1 month, you just have to reflect here." Seeing that she could not get anything out of him, Chu Luiyue could only nod her head. This student understands. With that, she continued to walk forward and stepped through the entrance of the spirit barrier. When her figure disappeared, Elder Yu Yu raised his eyebrows and looked at Elder Wanzheng. 1 month. Wanzheng, You are really willing to part with it? Elder Wanzheng snorted and turned his head away. If Bo Yin did not insist on doing this, would he have agreed? He had only taken in this disciple for 2 months, and had been locked up in Pengmin Mountain for 40 days. The amount of time he had spent cultivating with him was only slightly more than 10 days. How could he not feel heartache? But what could he do? Who asked that brat to always cause trouble? No matter how protective he was, there were times when he had no other choice. Elder Bo Yin suddenly spoke up. 1 month might not be able to smooth out his temper. He could see that he had to use extreme methods to deal with Chu Yu. Otherwise, he would not be able to suppress him. You have such a high opinion of him? Elder Yu was surprised. Oomph. Elder Bo Yin laughed. Wait till he stays with you for a period of time. You will know. Elder Yu's heart jumped, and a trace of uneasiness appeared. All right, since he's already here, we'll take our leave first. For the remaining month, I will leave that brat to you. Elder Bo Yin finished, and was about to leave with Elder Wanzheng. For some reason, Elder Yu inexplicably felt as if he had finally gotten rid of a certain troublesome problem. Elder Wanzheng reluctantly glanced at the barrier. Although he couldn't see anything, he still prayed for his precious disciple in his heart. This month, please don't let anything happen. After Bo Yin and Elder Wanzheng left, Elder Yu also quickly returned to the spirit barrier. Beast Park. Not long after entering this place, Chu Luyue understood where this name came from. The surroundings were filled with the unique aura of magical beasts. There was a faint smell of blood in the air. That was clearly a unique smell that only came from the blood that flowed out of the torn flesh. Chu Luyue was walking on a narrow path in the mountains. Bushes grew on both sides of the road, and the branches were luxuriant. The afterglow cast mottled shadows on the ground. It was silent and windless. She walked forward step by step. Occasionally, one could see the marks of magical beasts on the ground. The deeper she went, the tighter her muscles became, and her mind was highly focused. She paid full attention to every tiny sound and every subtle change in her surroundings. Along the way, she turned back to look once. Elder Yu didn't follow her. Obviously, they had made up their minds to let her do everything herself. Roar! Suddenly, a low and violent tiger roar came from the side of the mountain. Chu Luyue immediately turned to look. Separated by the dense forest, she couldn't see clearly what was going on. However, the powerful pressure contained in that roar caused her mind to go blank for a moment. That was an inestimable power. It was at least a 9th-grade magical beast. Chu Luyue's heart instantly jumped. There were probably more than 1 or 2 magical beasts in this beast park. She took a deep breath and examined her surroundings more carefully before continuing forward. Swoosh! The sound of something piercing through the air could be heard. Chu Luyue's eyes sharpened, and she quickly dodged to the side. Thud! An extremely sharp grayish-brown steel needle stabbed into the spot where Chu Luyue was standing just now. The steel needle was thick at the top and sharp at the bottom. Its tip was about the size of an adult's pinky finger. The lower it went, the sharper it became. Because it was wrapped in a powerful force, the tip of the needle was still shaking slightly after it was inserted into the ground. And on the originally flat mountain ground, a few cracks suddenly appeared. This showed how powerful this thing was. If this needle were to hit her body, it would probably pierce through her flesh in an instant. But the key was that this wasn't a yuan instrument, because there were some fresh bloodstains on its tip, and if one looked carefully, there was a layer of fine hair on it. This was obviously bang, bang, bang. Heavy and majestic footsteps sounded, and the ground trembled. Chu Luyue's heart skipped a beat, and she stared in the direction of the sound. A huge figure gradually appeared in her line of sight. It was a wild beast that was brownish-black in color. It was tall and sturdy, with 4 strong legs, a silver horn on its head, and a string of steel needles on its back. This was the thing that was shot at Chu Luyue just now. Its orange-yellow eyes were cold and indifferent, and they were wrapped in a shocking pressure. Its huge feet stepped on the ground, and its sharp claws were clearly visible. There was no doubt that this foot could directly trample a person into meat paste. Chu Luyue's breathing stagnated. A 9th grade, steel spine beast. She had only heard of this kind of magical beast in rumors. It was said that it was born as a ninth-grade magical beast, and it was extremely strong. As it grew older, its body would rapidly expand. After it reached adulthood, it would break through the shackles and become a divine beast. It was said that the powerful god-tier steel spine beast's body was as heavy as a mountain. Wherever it went, it would be majestic. The steel needle-like thing on its back was one of its most basic trump cards. It was incomparably hard and extremely sharp. Most importantly, it contained a strong poison. Once injured, a ninth-grade martial artist of the same level would die in less than an hour. This showed how powerful this steel spine beast was. And the one in front of her, although its body was huge, it hadn't broken through to the god tier, and should still be considered a cub. Of course, even if it was a cub, its body was still terrifyingly huge. Chu Luiyue stood in front of it, as small as an ant. She wasn't even as tall as one of its legs. Under such circumstances, if the other party wanted to directly trample her to death, it seemed to be only a matter of minutes. Both sides were in a stalemate. The steel spine beast first glanced at the steel needle on the ground that had missed, as if it was somewhat dissatisfied that it didn't succeed. Then, its eyes turned and looked at Chu Luiyue. Cold, awe-inspiring. That was the disdain and indifference based on its powerful strength. A strong killing intent appeared in its eyes. Bang! It raised its leg and took a step forward. Chapter 1255. The origin power in Chu Luiyue's body surged, and starlight flashed on her fingertips. She wouldn't use Scarlet Heaven Sword unless it was a critical moment. Although the steel spine beast in front of her was dangerous, with her current strength, she might not be a match for it. At the very least, escape was the best strategy. However, at this moment, a strange rustling sound suddenly came from behind her. Chu Luiyue didn't want to look back, but the sound was getting closer and closer, and it even carried a hint of danger. She had no choice but to be cautious. Thus, she turned her body sideways and quickly glanced in that direction. With this look, Chu Luiyue's pupil shrank, and her scalp went numb. Because what came from behind her was actually a group of snakes. Not just one, but a group of snakes entangled with each other. At a glance, there were at least 100 of them. These snakes were about the thickness of a thumb, and their bodies were colorful. Under the afterglow, they reflected a cold and magnificent light. However, at this moment, Chu Luiyue wasn't in the mood to appreciate it. Instead, her hair stood on end. Because each of these snakes was a ninth-grade magical beast, the triangular sword-toothed snake. The reason for this name was that their heads were flat and triangular. Every time they were in attack mode, two sharp sword-shaped teeth would be exposed, flickering with a cold white light. Of course, they were also poisonous. Their toxicity was stronger than that of the steel spine beast. At this moment, they were in groups and were heading toward Chu Luiyue. Wherever they passed, the ground would emit a faint rustling sound. She didn't feel it earlier, but after seeing their true appearance and hearing this sound, Chu Luiyue felt her whole body go numb. Now she was attacked from two sides, and she couldn't advance or retreat. In front of her was the steel spine beast, and behind her was the triangular sword-toothed snake. No matter which one it was, she didn't have full confidence that she could finish them off or repel them without getting injured. Chu Luiyue clearly felt her whole body stiffen. If Dumpling was here now, these problems could be easily solved. After all, it was a red-tailed phoenix with a noble bloodline. Even if it only relied on this layer of natural bloodline suppression, it would be able to subdue these guys. But now, how could she beat them all by herself? At this moment, Chu Luiyue finally understood why Elder Wan Zheng was so against this punishment when Elder Bo Yin suggested it. She recalled the meaningful look in Elder Wan Zheng's eyes before she left. At that time, she had naively thought that it was because he couldn't bear to part with her. But now it seemed that he was clearly worried about her little life. Beast Park. Chu Luiyue crazily thought about how to solve her current predicament, as she circulated all the strength in her body. 5 specks of light had already appeared on her fingertips. If she couldn't, then she could only ask the help of the three-eyed eagle. But in the end, it was the last plan was. Many of the two was bice beasts, beasts, be like beasts, beasts. Jiang Xuan had already begun to suspect her because she had brought along a red-tailed phoenix. Fortunately, Lu Yintang had one as well, which gave her room to explain herself. But once she knew about the existence of the three-eyed eagle, she would be able to confirm Chu Liuyue's true identity. It could be said that it was a coincidence for cultivators in this world to have beasts of the same race. But if one had two, there was definitely a problem. Chu Liyue didn't know much about the beast park. Other than Elder Bo Yin mentioning that there were a few elders patrolling the area, she wasn't sure if there were other people around. Moreover, if the elders knew about this, they wouldn't be able to keep it a secret. Although there were many elders in Lingxiao College, and they each had their own duties, they still kept in contact with each other. Moreover, information was passed on very quickly. This was good for the college. It allowed the college to deal with many things quickly and efficiently. But it wasn't so good for Chu Liyue now. The three parties were speechless. The surrounding space seemed to be solidifying inch by inch. Chu Liyue's heart was beating violently. Thump, thump. The steel-spine beast and the three-horned sword-toothed snake also noticed each other's existence. Hiss! Many of the three-horned sword-toothed snakes made strange and numbing sounds. Their green eyes flashed with undisguised ruthlessness and murderous intent. Bang! The steel-spine beast took a step forward. The rocks under its feet shattered and the ground shook. It didn't show any signs of weakness. Chu Liyue instantly understood something. Both parties entered a hostile state because of fighting for her? Of course. Chu Liyue was very clear that they weren't fighting for her because they liked her. They were fighting for the right and opportunity to kill her. Fight! Start fighting! Chu Liyue shouted silently in her heart. As long as both parties were fighting, she could find a chance to leave this place. Chi! The steel-spine beast made the first move. A steel needle shot out from its back. Tut! That thing was very fast. Chu Liyue only saw a straight and blurry mark. The next moment she heard a familiar sound. That steel needle was inserted into the position one step away from the three-horned sword-toothed snake. Chu Liyue's heart suddenly tightened. No fiend could remain calm after being provoked like this. This time, a fierce battle was unavoidable. Hiss! Just as Chu Liyue was waiting for the chaotic battle to begin, the three-horned sword-toothed snake suddenly started to retreat. Chu Liyue was stunned. What was going on? They weren't fighting anymore. But before she could figure it out, the steel-spine beast turned around and raised its foot to step on her. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1256. Chu Liyue almost cursed it out loud. This triangular sword-teethed snake was too useless. They were so brave just a moment ago. The steel-spine beast had only launched a probing attack, and they actually retreated just like that. This decision was made too hastily. Chu Liyue simply couldn't understand. Although the triangular sword-teethed snake's individual combat power couldn't compare to the steel-spine beast, they had the advantage in numbers. They didn't even have a friendly spar. Wasn't this too cowardly? She didn't have time to think too much. Seeing the steel-spine beast charging straight at her, she quickly dodged to the side. Bam! The steel-spine beast stomped heavily on the ground. A rather deep pit appeared on the originally flat ground. Several cracks quickly spread out in all directions. Chu Liyue randomly chose a direction with dense forest and quickly headed forward. She had already entered the beast park. Danger lurked in all directions. It didn't matter which direction she went. The most important thing now was to get rid of the steel-spine beast as soon as possible. The denser the forest, the more advantageous it was for her. Chu Liyue's movements were nimble. In the blink of an eye, her figure had disappeared into the lush forest. Roar! The steel-spine beast raised its head and roared. The trees that were relatively close to him were crushed by this pressure and actually directly exploded. The steel-spine beast lifted its leg and ran in the direction of Chu Liyue. As for the triangular sword-teethed snake, after retreating for a distance, it suddenly dispersed. Hundreds of snakes scattered in all directions. Their bodies were very small. Once they burrowed into the grass, they could hide perfectly. Therefore, after dispersing, they burrowed into the forest and hid themselves. There was only the extremely subtle sound of snake scales sliding across the ground. It was occasionally audible, but it also disappeared very quickly. Chu Liyue used her full speed to escape forward. She leaped and jumped like a mountain elf. Her figure was faintly discernible in the forest. But even so, she couldn't successfully shake off the steel-spine beast that was chasing after her. Its destructive power was even more terrifying than Chu Liyue had expected. She originally thought that by relying on these dense trees, she could form an obstacle to the steel-spine beast and slow it down. But in reality, the steel-spine beast didn't care about this at all. Its physical strength was extremely strong. Everywhere it passed, it destroyed everything in its path. Thus, one man and one beast, one at the front and one at the back, began to compete in the forest. Elder Yu stood with his hands behind his back and waited at the foot of the mountain for a while. Even if he didn't see it for himself, he could roughly guess what had happened from the changes in the energy fluctuations. He couldn't help but snort. It seemed like Chu Yu was already entangled. He didn't know how long this kid could last. One had to know that in this place, apart from the cubs, the lowest level of adult magical beasts was level 9. They were not easy to deal with. Furthermore, in order to nurture and stimulate the abilities of these magical beasts to the greatest extent, there was basically no one in the entire beast park other than a few elders, who were in charge of maintenance and patrolling. These demonic beasts were especially sensitive to the aura of humans, and they were born with a strong desire to attack. Chu Yu's talent and strength were not bad, but he was still a child in the end. He was no match for these magical beasts. Let's hope this kid can survive the night. He glanced at the setting sun and shook his head with a smile. The sky quickly darkened, the forest was shady, and the lighting was even worse. As Chu Liyue ran forward, she secretly thought of other ways. This couldn't go on. She couldn't shake off the steel-spine beasts with her own strength. Furthermore, as time passed, her physical strength was rapidly depleting, and her speed inevitably decreased. However, the steel-spine beasts seemed to be getting braver as they fought. They were born to be good at fighting, and their explosive power and endurance were extremely strong. Chu Liyue was really worried that they would drag her to her death in the end. It wasn't that she didn't think of fighting the steel-spine beasts head-on. In fact, she had already accumulated her strength and was prepared at the beginning. However, when she saw the triangular sword-toothed snakes choose to retreat, she hesitated. To be able to make them so fearful was enough to prove the power of these steel-spine beasts. Although she could fight against a level 8 warrior now, she could only lose in front of a level 9 warrior. Moreover, level 9 warriors of the same level were far inferior to level 9 magical beasts in terms of combat strength. After thinking about it, it wasn't feasible to use force. She had to think of other ways. However, this steel-spine beast kept chasing after her relentlessly. She didn't even have a chance to breathe, so what other good ideas could she have? Suddenly, Chu Liyue felt a warning in her heart. Her mind was highly tense, and she immediately forced herself to stop. Previously, she had been moving forward at high speed. Now that she suddenly stopped, it caused the blood in her lungs to churn. However, she couldn't care less about this now, because danger was ahead. Bang! The sound of heavy footsteps could be heard. This sound was somewhat familiar. It was very similar to the footsteps of the steel-spine beasts, but it was several times heavier. This time, she clearly hadn't seen the other party's shadow, but Chu Liyue felt that the other party had directly stepped on her heart. She stood on a tree and held onto the tree trunk with one hand. Her entire body was tense, and she almost suffocated. The next moment, a figure that was like a small mountain appeared in front of her. With just a glance, Chu Liyue immediately recognized that this was also a steel-spine beast. Moreover, its body size was several times that of the previous one. This was definitely an adult steel-spine beast. It was walking towards her. Trees fell and rocks shattered. For a moment, Chu Liyue almost suspected that this mountain might be flattened by it. Bang! 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 Suddenly, for some reason, the steel-spine beast behind her suddenly sped up. Roar. This cry was very different from the previous one. It lacked the cold and dignified aura, and had a hint of joy and coquettishness. And this was clearly aimed at the steel-spine beast that had just appeared opposite them. Chu Luyue hurriedly turned back to take a look, and her heart immediately turned cold. These two seemed to be mother and son. Then what other way did she have to leave this place safely and unharmed? Her hands were tightly clasped on the tree trunk, and her knuckles turned white. Because of the long run, she had consumed a lot of strength. At this time, her forehead was already covered with fine beads of sweat, and her back was almost drenched. I can't go on like this, Chu Luyue gritted her teeth. If I'm really forced into a desperate situation, then I have no choice but to show my trump card. Boom. The steel-spine beast cub rushed over and directly hit the tree Chu Luyue was on. The tree, which was as thick as two people hugging it, instantly collapsed. Chu Luyue tiptoed and was about to fly up. However, the steel-spine beast seemed to have expected it and directly pounced over. Chapter 1257. If this stomp landed, Chu Luyue would probably become a pile of minced meat on the spot. Chu Luyue's mind raced, and a biting cold aura gathered in her palm. However, just as that kick was about to land and Chu Luyue was about to fight to the death, the adult steel-spine beast that was originally standing opposite suddenly rushed over and knocked the steel-spine beast to the ground with its head. Bang! The steel-spine beast cub's heavy body flew out, and the trees along the way fell one after another. After dragging for a long distance, it finally stopped. There was a deep rut left on the ground, and gravel and broken wood were scattered everywhere. It was a mess. Chu Luyue was dumbfounded. The steel-spine beast cub that was sent flying was also dumbfounded. The surroundings were silent. Chu Luyue stiffened her neck and looked at the adult steel-spine beast standing beside her. What's going on? Why is it helping me? Could it be that the steel-spine beast cub isn't its? But soon she dispelled this guess. Because after the steel-spine beast cub came back to its senses, it didn't get up and just wailed. Roar! Chu Luyue subconsciously looked back and saw it lying on the ground, looking at the adult steel-spine beast in disbelief. Its eyes were filled with grievance and pity. Roar, roar! The next moment, Chu Luyue clearly saw a layer of mist quickly accumulating in the cub's lantern-like eyes. Drip, drip. Fist-sized teardrops kept falling and hitting the ground, creating small puddles. Chu Luyue. If it weren't for my parents, it probably wouldn't have such a reaction. However, this cub didn't seem to be very well received. Because when the adult steel-spine beast saw it crying, not only did it not comfort it, but it also walked over and kicked it. The cub didn't expect his parents to be so ruthless to him. He didn't pay attention and was kicked out again. The crying stopped abruptly, and then it rolled a few more times. Perhaps it was because the steelback beast was naturally thick-skinned, so it didn't show any mercy this time. The sound of flesh and bones being kicked made Chu Luyue's eyes twitch. I really didn't expect things to develop in this direction. Roar! The adult steelback beast roared at the cub, sounding a little strict. The cub had suffered a loss and learned its lesson. Finally, it no longer dared to cause trouble. It put away its previous temper and obediently admitted its mistake. The adult steel-spine beast roared again. It was unknown what it said, but the cub suddenly raised its head. A look of shock flashed across its eyes. Then it glanced at Chu Luyue and shook its head frantically. Roar! The adult steel-spine beast let out another roar, causing the cub to pause and immediately become obedient. Chu Luyue stood aside awkwardly. Why did it seem like he was the one who got into a fight with the other party's child? But after the other party's parents came, not only did they not blame him, they even lectured his child? Wasn't the quality of this adult steel-spine beast a little too high? Chu Luyue originally wanted to leave. However, considering that he couldn't even compare to the cub's speed, he definitely had no chance against this adult steel-spine beast. He might as well stay here and see what the other party's attitude was. After waiting for a while, the two steel-spine beasts finally finished their conversation. Of course, this conversation was only the adult steel-spine beast teaching the cub a lesson. Bang! The adult steel spine beast walked over. The cub followed behind dejectedly. Chuliu's heart tightened. It's here. She subconsciously straightened her back and looked up. It couldn't be helped. The other party was too big. Chu Luiyue could only see the other party's thigh. The adult steel spine beast stood not far in front of her. On the other hand, the cub moved over step by step. Anyone could see that its face was full of reluctance. As if disdaining its slow movements, the adult steel spine beast behind it raised its leg and kicked its butt again. Ugh! The cub almost flew up from the kick and subconsciously turned its head. It originally wanted to protest, but when it met the pair of intimidating eyes, it immediately stopped. After hesitating for a while, it only let out a low sound from its throat, which sounded very pitiful. The adult steel spine beast was unmoved and raised its head. The cub could only retract its gaze and walk over to Chu Luiyue step by step. The human and beast looked at each other. The cub glared at Chu Luiyue and then lowered its head aggrieved. Chu Luiyue was still confused when she saw the steel spine beast cub's head stretch out in front of her. The silver horn was not far in front of her. She could reach it by raising her hand. Chu Luiyue was stunned for a moment, then suddenly understood something. This is an apology. As soon as this guess appeared, Chu Luiyue subconsciously wanted to deny it, because this was simply too absurd. One had to know that a moment ago, she was being chased by the steel spine beast with nowhere to run, and almost died at its feet. And now, not only did it stop attacking, but it was also apologizing so humbly? This was simply too shocking. However, other than this reason, Chu Luiyue could not think of any other explanation. She looked at the adult steel spine beast behind her in a daze. She saw that pair of eyes. Deep, dignified, but with a trace of undetectable nostalgia. Chu Luiyue suddenly felt an extremely familiar feeling in her heart. This steel spine beast, she opened her mouth, but no words came out. A bold idea quickly flashed through her mind. Perhaps she had met it long ago? As if sensing her emotional fluctuations, the steel-backed beast finally came forward. It looked into Chu Luiyue's eyes and lowered its head. Unfortunately, it was still too tall. Even if Chu Luiyue raised her hand, she couldn't reach it. After realizing this, it blinked and half-knelt without any hesitation. Then it moved forward gentle and dependent. Chu Luiyue felt something rush out from the bottom of her heart. She subconsciously reached out and stroked its head. The steel spine beast's skin and flesh were very rough and hard. It felt like touching a piece of iron. But for some reason, Chu Luiyue's heart softened. Suddenly, her gaze focused, and she saw that there seemed to be a scar on the steel spine beast's horn. It looked like someone had cut it with a sharp weapon, about half an inch long. It was difficult to notice from afar, but standing close, it was clearly visible. Chu Luiyue subconsciously touched it. In an instant, images rushed out from her mind. She frowned and almost fell to the ground. The steel spine beast looked at her worriedly. Chu Luiyue closed her eyes and took a step forward, leaning closer to it. The steel spine beast let her hug it without moving. The cub watched from the side, not knowing what to do. After a long time, Chu Luiyue sighed softly. Cheong, I'm back. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1258. Ever since she knew that she had lost a part of her memory, Chu Luiyue started to think of all sorts of ways to make herself remember. Previously, she had tried many methods and experienced a lot of torture, but most of the time, it was futile. She couldn't remember no matter how hard she tried. She didn't remember how she came to the Divine Ruins world. She didn't know how she got first place on the Green Cloud Roll. She didn't know what she had done in Lingxiao College, and why she had forgotten everything in the end. Many times, she even felt that what she did was meaningless. Since the fog was already there, and she couldn't see clearly, wouldn't it be better if she didn't look at it? But now, she finally realized that it wasn't meaningless. Because what was behind the fog was the scenery that she couldn't bear to forget. Just like now, she suddenly remembered some of the things that happened in the Beast Park. Even though her memory was still incomplete and not very clear, but it was still very precious to her. Cheong. Chu Luiyue took a deep breath and hid the tears in her eyes. She hugged it tightly, then let go of her hand and took a few steps back. She carefully sized it up and smiled brightly. Ah Cheong, you've grown up. A few years ago, when they first met in the Beast Park, it wasn't much older than the cub next to it. She didn't expect it to be an adult now, and even have a child. Ah Cheong intimately rubbed against her palm and stood up. Its eyes were filled with joy and excitement. Actually, at the beginning, it wasn't too sure about Chu Liyue's identity, so it had a cautious attitude. But now, it could finally be at ease. Oh, the cub, who had been ignored for a long time, finally found a chance to interrupt. Its eyes moved back and forth between Chu Liyue and its mother, full of confusion and confusion. Obviously, it had been ignorant until now. It was clearly its mother's son. Why did its mother treat this human who suddenly appeared better than it did itself? Chu Liyue looked at its jealous and angry expression and couldn't help but laugh. Don't worry, I won't snatch your mother. The cub's eyes were full of suspicion. Not snatching? Then why was its mother so good to it? And she even hugged her mother just now. Not to mention that her mother had hit it for the first time because of her. It was very angry, and the consequences were very serious. Thus, it went to its mother's side and rubbed itself against her like a spoiled child, looking at her with eager eyes. Let her go. Let her go. Let her go. Bang! Its body was once again kicked away by its mother. Roar! I can't live like this anymore, Woowoo. Chu Liyue's eyebrows twitched slightly. Ah Cheong, you're a mother now. Why hasn't your temper changed at all? He's your son after all. Ao. Exactly. To think that even this human would say something like that. Mother sure is ruthless. Ah Cheong glanced at it. It quickly shut its mouth, not daring to say another word. It finally understood that this human was its natural nemesis. Unfortunately, her mother was too biased towards her, so she definitely couldn't do anything today. We'll wait until we have a chance to counterattack. Seeing that it had finally calmed down, Ah Cheong looked at Chu Liyue. How would this little fellow understand? If it wasn't for this woman in front of it, it would have ceased to exist long ago. Chu Liyue laughed. Let's go. Let's go and see your current home. Late at night, the moon was in the middle of the sky. Elder Yu, who was sitting on a certain mountain, kept the Xian formation in front of him and looked up. It's already so late. I wonder how Chu Yu is doing now. Thinking of this, he looked towards the distant mountains. In the quiet night, other than the occasional wind blowing through the mountains, there was no other sound. Everything was the same as usual. Strange. Elder Yu stroked his beard. Logically speaking, when a stranger enters the Beast Park, it will definitely attract the attacks of many magical beasts. It shouldn't be so quiet. This situation was really strange. But he was sure that Chu Yu wasn't in trouble. Otherwise, the Xian formation would have already acted strangely. Could it be that he found a secluded place to hide? Suddenly he clapped his hands. TSK, how could I forget that he still has a contracted divine beast? It was said that it was a red-tailed phoenix with a very pure bloodline. With such a divine beast keeping watch, ordinary magical beasts really wouldn't find trouble with him. This saved Chu Yu a lot of trouble. Elder Yu couldn't help but laugh. Let's hope that tomorrow can still be so peaceful. In this Beast Park, there was an existence that wasn't afraid of the red-tailed phoenix. That night, with Ah Cheong's help, Chu Liyue could finally rest peacefully. In the cave where they lived, Chu Liyue and Ah Cheong chatted briefly about some things. Then, she leaned against a huge rock alone and rested her head on her arm, planning to sleep. Ah Cheong also knew that she was very tired today, so she didn't disturb her and stayed by her side to guard her. But Chu Liyue didn't sleep well. In her dream, there were some familiar and unfamiliar scenes. Most of them were related to the Beast Park. Of course, there was also Ah Cheong. Speaking of which, they could be considered to be fated. When Chu Liyue first came to the Beast Park, the first magical beast she encountered was it. At that time, it was being chased by other divine beasts. While fleeing in a sorry state, it met Chu Liyue. She helped it escape, and even gave it a name. But there was no contract. Chu Liyue thought. At that time, she had already contracted dumpling. Suddenly, Chu Liyue opened her eyes. Dumpling had also followed her to the Divine Ruins world. She actually never thought of asking it what it still remembered. Digression. I apologize to everyone again. Yesterday there was a blunder. I originally planned to refund everyone's Xiaoxiang dollars, but because there were many subscription platforms, Hongxiu, QQ, and other readers couldn't refund them one by one. So, in the end, I replaced the repeated chapter with today's first update. Those who have subscribed can continue to read as usual. I'm really sorry for causing trouble for everyone. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1259. Sensing the movement on Chu Liyue's side, both of them looked over. Ah Cheong looked at her worriedly. Chu Liyue gave it a reassuring look. Don't worry, I'm fine. As she said that, she rubbed her temples. That's right, why didn't I think of it before? When she was in her teens, she had already made a contract with her own magical beast. At that time, Dumpling was only a 9-colored heavenly pheasant, but at that time, it was already considered one of the most powerful magical beasts in the entire Tianling dynasty. After she successfully made the contract, her father even held a palace banquet to celebrate. From then on, Dumpling had been following her. And coming to the Divine Ruins world was something that happened later. Logically speaking, Dumpling should have come with her at that time. But after so long, Dumpling had never mentioned this. Dumpling. Chu Liyue called out in her heart, but there was no response. Only then did she remember that Dumpling had stayed at Thousand Wine Mountain and was not by her side now. She frowned. It seemed that she would have to wait a month before she could clarify this matter. She sat in a daze for a while before lying down again. This time, she finally fell asleep in a daze. While Chu Liyue spent the night in the Beast Park with complicated feelings, the people outside were also not calm. Thousand Wine Mountain. On the top of the mountain, beside the spring, there were a few figures standing. Standing in the middle was Elder Bo Yen. Beside him were Elder Ouyang and Shang Yusen. Is this what you've done? Elder Bo Yen looked around and asked faintly, even though he had heard them talk about it before. When he saw this scene, he could not help but feel angry. These people really knew how to cause trouble. The punishment from before was really too light. Cough. Elder Ouyang coughed. Actually, it's mainly the surrounding trees and rocks that were destroyed, but there's no problem with the spring. Elder Bo Yen sneered. If there was a problem with the spring, do you think I would still be here talking to you about this? Elder Ouyang shut his mouth awkwardly. Shang Yusen was still relatively relaxed. Ai Bo Yen, since this has already happened, there's no point in talking about it anymore, right? What's more, those who should be punished have already been punished. None of us escaped punishment, right? Why don't we start right away and restore this place as soon as possible? Elder Bo Yen gave him a warning look. There will be no next time. Although the 10,000 Wine Mountain had been sealed, it could only be repaired at night. That was why they had waited until now to come. As he spoke, Elder Bo Yen walked to the side of the spring and carefully examined it. The mouth of the spring, which gurgled during the day, became very calm at night. Under the calm surface of the water, streaks of silver tianlei gathered and intertwined with each other. I already said that there's nothing wrong with the spring. Shang Yusen laughed. You don't trust me and Ouyang? At that time we were very careful. Elder Bo Yen looked away. This spring has great implications. It's best to be cautious. After all, they had caused such a huge commotion. So of course he would be worried. Elder Ouyang nodded in agreement. Bo Yen is right. For this thing, our entire academy has put in a lot of effort. We don't dare to have any problems. Calculating the time, it seems that it's almost time, right? Elder Bo Yen shook his head. It was originally going to end, but some time ago, Chuyu came and caused a ruckus, causing the number of tianlei in here to decrease. The time was delayed again. Fortunately, he didn't take much away at that time. After some time, it will be able to recover. Elder Ouyang sighed. In the end, this Chuyu really knows how to cause trouble. Fortunately, you threw him into the Beast Park this time. You have to polish his character properly. Otherwise, what would happen if he was always so bold and arrogant? Elder Bo Yin nodded. I think so too. Chu Yu had a precious treasure in his hands, so it was inevitable that he would attract the envy and jealousy of many people. If he didn't improve his strength as soon as possible, no one knew what would happen in the future. After all, it was impossible for any so-called backer to protect him from afar all the time. In the end, becoming stronger was the most important thing. I wonder how that kid is doing in the Beast Park now. As Elder Ouyang spoke, he glanced in the direction of the Beast Park. He probably won't be able to sleep on the first night, right? Elder Bo Yin laughed. He has a red-tailed phoenix. Don't worry too much. If he didn't know about this contracted divine beast, he wouldn't have dared to put Chu Yu in the Beast Park for a month. Suddenly, there seemed to be a sound coming from the spring. Elder Bo Yin immediately lowered his head to look, but only saw a shallow ripple spreading from within. He stared for a while, and only retracted his gaze after confirming that there was nothing unusual. Let's begin. The three of them separated, and began to repair the area they were in charge of. In the spring, several Tianlei flickered quietly. A streak of red flashed across the ink like water. A night passed in the blink of an eye. When Chu Luyue woke up, the sky was already bright. A Qiong was guarding outside the cave, but the cub wasn't there. It seemed to have gone out. Hearing the movement, A Qiong turned around. Chu Luyue got up and walked outside. She stretched her muscles and bones, and heard the sound of bones cracking. She looked forward with a smile on her lips. This place is still the same as before. It's a good place to cultivate. A Qiong looked at her curiously, as if she was asking for her opinion. Chu Luyue smiled. A Qiong, I'm going into seclusion from today onwards. I'll have to trouble you to guard me. A Qiong nodded. Chu Luyue felt much more at ease. She turned around and returned to the cave. Yes, she was preparing to break through to the peak of the 7th level. Ever since she recovered her Tianjing Yuan Meridian, her cultivation speed had increased by a lot. After coming to Lingxiao College, the rich force of heaven and earth was like adding wings to a tiger. In addition, she had experienced all these before. Hence, even if there was no one to guide her, she could still break through smoothly. Now, she only needed a relatively quiet and stable environment. Some of the magical beasts in the Beast Park were reared in the past, while some were brought back by the elders and students from outside. The number of divine beasts was not small. If Chu Luyue was alone, she would definitely not choose to break through at this time and place. But now that A Qiong was here, she could be more at ease. These divine beasts were afraid of each other. Usually, they wouldn't invade each other and lived in harmony. She basically wouldn't have any problems cultivating in A Qiong's cave. She sat cross-legged, her shoulders drooping naturally, and her hands on her knees. Then, she closed her eyes and started to absorb the force of heaven and earth around her quickly. Streaks of energy rushed into her body. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1260. It was peaceful in the school. Elder Bo Yin kept the incident on 10,000 Wine Mountain under wraps. Other than the few of them, no one else knew about it. Everything was the same as usual. Even the news of Chu Luyue being locked up in the Beast Park was kept under wraps by Elder Bo Yin. On one hand, the elders in charge of patrolling knew that those who were sent there must have done something. The less they said, the less mistakes they would make. On the other hand, they were not people who liked to gossip. They knew that Bo Yin and Wan Zheng did not want this incident to spread, so they kept quiet. Hence, even if Chu Luyue did not appear in front of everyone, no one suspected anything. In everyone's eyes, she was busy cultivating with Rong Xiao. It was normal for her to stay in Jiuheng Mountain. Days like this passed for several days in a row. Fifth brother, I heard that the mystic teachers and elders are having a class together in the afternoon. On one of the mountain peaks, Luo Shishir and Zhuo Sheng had finished cultivating. They wanted to visit Luo Yinlin since they had not seen him for a long time. Unfortunately, Luo Yinlin was not around, so they went to look for Luo Yinming. Luo Shishir asked as she poured tea for the other two. A smile appeared on Luo Yinming's face as she nodded. That's right. Master said that we have always been sparring with each other. After a long time, we already know each other's styles. It's boring, so we discussed with the other elders to have a class together. This matter was actually not uncommon in the Spirit Firmament Academy. Not only mystic teachers, but martial artists and celestial physician also had such activities from time to time. To put it nicely, it was a friendly exchange. To put it bluntly, it was a battle between each other. Most of the students in the school were favored by the heavens. They had some pride in their bones, and were very competitive. Of course, the elders also had a similar desire to win. When the elders had a class together, they would often personally spar with each other and demonstrate to the students. This way, the students could learn a lot and increase their strength through a certain amount of competition. Cultivation, in the end, was for the sake of becoming stronger, for the sake of establishing an invincible position in battle. There were many benefits to this, so the elders and students were happy to do so. Who are the elders that have come? Luo Shishir asked curiously. Luo Yinming thought for a moment. Other than our master, there are 3 other elders. Oh, 7th madam is here too. Does that mean 4th brother will be there too? Yes. In fact, there were many people who wanted to learn from 4th brother. Luo Yinming said with envy and admiration. Luo Yinlin had always been in the top 10 on the Mystic Cultivator ranking, and was considered an absolute leader among the students. There were countless people who wanted to challenge him. After all, it was possible to learn more and faster by fighting with a powerhouse than by building a car behind closed doors. I wonder when I'll be able to catch up to 4th brother, Luo Yinlin said with some emotion. Luo Shishir comforted him. 5th brother's talent is outstanding. He will definitely be as outstanding as 4th brother in the future. Luo Yinlin shook his head. A few years ago, when 4th brother first entered the academy, he was about the same age as me. Within a month of coming to the academy, 4th brother had already made it onto the Azure Sky roll. As for me, I'm still far from it. He usually didn't say much about this, but he actually cared a lot about it. As disciples of the Luo clan, it was inevitable that they would compare themselves to each other. Luo Shishir wanted to say something but hesitated. Luo Yinlin laughed self-deprecatingly. Shishir, you don't have to think of anything to comfort me. I know it in my heart. In our Luo clan, the most talented mystic cultivator is 4th brother. Haven't we known this since we were young? I'm only saying this because I want to work hard and cultivate, so that I won't be too far behind. Luo Shishir saw his sincere expression, and knew that he was speaking from the bottom of his heart, so she didn't say anything else. Father and the elders have always praised 5th brother for his open-mindedness, and that he has a bright future. Luo Yinming smiled. Actually, that Lin Qifei is not bad. If there's a chance this time, I'll definitely have a good spar with her. Zhuosheng patted his shoulder hard. I support you. There's just one thing. Have you seen Chuyu recently? Luo Yinming asked. That night, we agreed to have a chat when we had time. But it's been a few days, and I haven't even seen his shadow. Compared to Lin Qifei, he actually wanted to spar with Chuyu more. This was because when Elder Huafeng mentioned Lin Qifei, his reaction was not as big as when he mentioned Chuyu. This made Luo Yinming suspect that Chuyu's talent in this aspect might be even stronger than Lin Qifei's. We haven't seen him either. Luo Shishir shook her head. He might be busy cultivating with senior brother Rong Xiu in Jiuheng Mountain? Anyway, I haven't heard any news about senior brother Rong Xiu these few days. Probably. Luo Yinming didn't think too much about it. Then I'll wait for him to come out before I look for him. Dong! The sound of a bell rang. Luo Yinming stood up and looked in a certain direction. It's time for class. I'll be leaving first. Let's talk another day. With that, he tapped his toes and quickly left. Luo Shishir and Zhuosheng didn't stay any longer, and quickly left. When Luo Yinming arrived, there were already many people gathered halfway up the mountain. Obviously, these were all people who were going to class together today. Some of them looked familiar to him. They were all Elder Huafeng students, but he didn't know most of them. They were probably the other elders' students. Luo Yinming quickly looked around and found that his 4th brother, Luo Yinlin, hadn't appeared yet, so he found a few familiar friends and went to meet them. Because the elders hadn't arrived yet, The atmosphere was still relatively free and casual. Everyone stood in groups of 3 or 5 and talked about something from time to time. Of course, most of them were about today's class. This time, I want to challenge senior brother Luo Yinlin. I wonder if he will agree. Him? I think it's better to forget it. How can our standards be enough? Isn't it important to participate? It's a rare opportunity to fight with senior brother Luo Yinlin. It's good that you know. In my opinion, instead of placing all your hopes on someone who's unlikely to agree, why don't you change to someone who's not as strong and has less requirements? Hey, isn't that Jiang Jiwan? She's here today too? Her master, Elder Danqing, is also one of the elders in today's class. Isn't it normal for her to come? But then again, she's not a bad opponent to challenge. Hehe, I think you have an ulterior motive? Why do you care? A fair and virtuous woman is a gentleman's mate. Once, she was infatuated with senior brother Rong Xiao and ignored everyone else. But now, senior brother Rong Xiao already had a princess. She should look at the others, right? All kinds of words came, making Jiang Jiwan's already depressed mood even worse. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1261. She hadn't received any reply since she sent the letter a few days ago. Logically speaking, after such a long time, the letter should have reached the Immortal Water Mausoleum by now. But for some reason, there wasn't any movement from the other side. If it was in the past, even if her father hadn't found anything, he would have sent her a letter to comfort her. This time, it was really strange. For the past 2 days, she even started to have insomnia at night. She couldn't sleep well, so she didn't have much energy during the day and looked especially haggard. Pfft! A toad lusting after a swan's meat. Liang Xiaoxiao, who was standing at the side, also heard those words and couldn't help but curse in a low voice. How dare they dream of gaining your favors, Yuan? They're daydreaming. Even if you're not the princess consort of the Yuntian Tower, you're still not someone they can dream of. Don't you think so, Ziyuan? As she spoke, she looked at Jiang Jiwan. But when she looked, she realized that Jiang Jiwan didn't seem to be listening to her. Her eyes weren't focused, and her expression was dazed. It seemed like she was in a daze. Liang Xiaoxiao frowned, and a trace of dissatisfaction flashed through her heart. She was praising and comforting her out of goodwill, but she wasn't listening at all. Ziyuan? Liang Xiaoxiao's expression quickly returned to normal, and she called Jiang Jiwan twice. Jiang Jiwan came back to her senses. What's wrong? Liang Xiaoxiao felt even more uncomfortable, and she smiled. Nothing. What are you thinking about? Why are you so engrossed? Jiang Jiwan lowered her eyes. I miss Daddy a little. I haven't been back for so long. I wonder how things are at the Immortal Water Mausoleum. Liang Xiaoxiao almost laughed out loud. Miss Daddy. Others might believe Jiang Jiwan's words, but she didn't take half a word seriously. They'd known each other for a long time. In the years before Jiang Jiwan entered the academy, she spent most of her time at the Immortal Water Mausoleum. She didn't even have the chance to go to the Yuntian Tower, because her father kept urging her to cultivate diligently. Jiang Jiwan's father doted on her, but this doting came with conditions. If Jiang Jiwan wasn't outstanding enough, she wouldn't have had everything she had today. The Immortal Water Mausoleum, Jiang Jiwan herself said she was tired of staying there. Ever since she entered the Spirit Firmament Academy, she wished she could stay here forever, free and unrestrained. She had never said anything like missing her father and home. It was obvious that this was just a casual excuse. With the other party's attitude, Liang Xiaoxiao naturally didn't want to be snubbed. Ziyuan, TSS Ziyuan, T Ziyuan, S. Since you want to, why don't you ask your master for a leave of absence? Ziyuan. If it were any other time, Jiang Ziyuan would have immediately noticed Liang Xiaoxiao's displeasure and coaxed her to ease their relationship. I'll go after today's class is over. Liang Xiaoxiao almost laughed out of anger when she heard Jiang Jiwan's words. She lost interest in continuing the conversation. After waiting for a while, She found an excuse and went to the side to chat with the others. Jiang Jiwan's mind was a little muddle-headed, so she didn't even care about this. Not long after, the elders arrived. Other than Elder Huafeng, Elder Danqing, 7th Madam, and Elder Shufeng, there was also Elder Huafeng. The students quieted down when they saw them arrive. They looked at them with excitement and curiosity. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that when these few elders gathered together, it was definitely a top-notch lineup. There were hundreds of elders in Lingxiao College, and almost one-third of them were mystic masters. There would always be differences in strength among cultivators. The elders were no exception, and these people were all recognized by everyone as the most powerful peak existences. The students were naturally excited. The 4 elders first formed groups of 2, and each of them carried out a battle. After the demonstration, he gave the students some time to study on their own. Finally, it was time for the students to challenge each other. This was also the segment that everyone paid the most attention to. Many students quickly chose their own opponents to spar with. There were also some people who came to look for Jiang Jiwan, but they were all rejected by her. After the 5th young man was rejected, he didn't leave like the previous people. He only smiled at Jiang Jiwan and said, "Ziyuan, we've known each other for 2 years. You should know how I feel about you. In the past, I didn't say much because I knew that your heart belonged to someone else. But now, it's impossible between you and him. Why can't you consider me?" Hearing that Rong Xiu was involved, Jiang Jiwan finally raised her head. She frowned and stared at him. She had some impression of this man. The relationship between them was still alright, but that was all. If he could speak properly, she would still be able to politely reply to him. Unfortunately, the last 2 sentences that he said just now really made her feel disgusted. She suppressed the anger in her heart and said, "If you like him, you like him. If you don't like him, you don't like him. This kind of thing can't be forced." Seeing that she was still like this, the man couldn't help but reach out to pull her. Jiang Jiwan immediately dodged, and a trace of disgust flashed across her eyes. This expression immediately made the man angry out of humiliation. He said in a deep voice, "Senior Rong Xiu already has a princess. No matter what you do, can you take back the position of princess?" Jiang Jiwan also exploded and couldn't help but raise her voice. "That woman is inferior to me in every aspect. What right does she have to occupy the position of princess consort? That position was originally mine." Chapter 1262. The man's expression changed when he heard this. Jiang Jiwan also regained her senses, and her heart skipped a beat. How could she say such things in front of everyone? Even if that was what she was thinking, or even if many people were thinking the same thing, she shouldn't have said such things. The surroundings quieted down. Some of the people standing nearby looked over. Their expressions were different, and their gazes were subtle. Jiang Jiwan felt like there was a dagger at her back, and she wanted to find a hole to hide in. There were some things that others could say, but she couldn't say. Previously, she had been hinting that she was the one who had been robbed of her love. Many people didn't know much about the situation at the Yuntian Tower, so they believed her words and thought that she had been wronged. They sympathized with her and loved her, but if she said it out loud, the nature of the situation would change completely. Wasn't she telling everyone that she had always regarded the position of princess consort as her own? I didn't mean that. Jiang Jiwan panicked and wanted to explain. But after stammering for a long time, she couldn't come up with a reasonable excuse. The more nervous she was, the more she didn't know how to salvage the situation. "Senior Jiang Jiwan." Right at this moment, an indifferent and cold voice sounded out, breaking this stiff and cold atmosphere. Jiang Jiwan immediately turned her head and saw that the person who spoke was a young man who looked about 20 years old. He was wearing a green robe, and he was tall and handsome. Just by standing there, he looked like an ink painting. His eyes were much lighter than the average person's, and it made him look more distant. "You are Lin Qifei." Jiang Jiwan remembered that she had seen this face before. If she remembered correctly, this person was the first one to enter the Master Roll of Honor among the new students. At the same time, he was the young master of the Lin family at Grotto Heaven Cliff. Back then, Chu Luiyue disguised himself and went to the Yuntian Tower with them. Thinking of this, Jiang Ziyuan felt a little annoyed in her heart. She loathed everything related to that woman. Why are you looking for me? Jiang Ziyuan's tone was obviously much colder. Lin Qifei didn't seem to mind and smiled. There is one thing. I heard that Senior Marshal's sister Jiang Ziyuan's cultivation as a mystic cultivator is quite outstanding. Zhifei would like to ask for guidance. Is that possible? So it was because of this. Jiang Ziyuan sneered in her heart. But on the surface, she looked indifferent. Junior brother Lin, you've just ascended to the Azure Sky role. So it's inevitable that you're young and impetuous. It was understandable that he wanted to find someone to challenge. However, you have to carefully choose your candidates. There are many mystic cultivators present who can spar with you. You don't have to waste your time with me. These words sounded polite on the surface, but in reality, they were mocking Lin Qifei for not being strong enough and overestimating himself. As long as one had a temper, it was inevitable that they would get angry. However, Lin Qifei's expression was normal when he heard this, as if he didn't care. Senior Marshal Sister Jiang Ziyuan is right. People who are weak indeed shouldn't try to compete with people who are much stronger than them. Otherwise, the one who will be humiliated and injured in the end will be themselves. Jiang Ziyuan's expression changed. This was blatantly scolding her. Even if one used their toes to think, they would know that Lin Qifei was hinting at what had happened to the people of Cloud Heaven Tower that day. She had lost to that Chu Luiyue several times in a row. What are you trying to say? Jiang Ziyuan had lost her patience. Lin Qifei smiled. What I wanted to say was what I said just now. Did Senior Marshal Sister Jiang Ziyuan not hear me clearly? He raised his chin slightly, and his eyes gradually turned cold. I wanted to ask Senior Marshal Sister Jiang Ziyuan to spar with me, but Senior Marshal Sister Jiang didn't seem willing to agree. However, I don't think the gap between me and Senior Marshal Sister Jiang is as big as you think. Jiang Ziyuan was so angry that she laughed. What did you say? Did he mean that she was arrogant and conceited? Junior Marshal Brother Lin, do you think that you're invincible just because you're on the Azure Cloud role? Don't forget that there are dozens of people between you and me in that regard. At this moment, the commotion had attracted the attention of many people. Most people thought that Lin Qifei was a little arrogant. He was very outstanding, but Jiang Ziyuan had been in the academy for several years, and she was publicly recognized as one of the best. She was ranked at the top of the Azure Cloud role. He actually said that. Wasn't he thinking too highly of himself? However, Lin Qifei didn't seem to care about the opinions of the people around him. He looked at Jiang Ziyuan and said, Senior Marshal Sister Jiang, if you don't believe me, you can give it a try. This was a challenge that couldn't be any more direct. No, it could be said that he was provoking her. Are you sure? Jiang Ziyuan sized up Lin Qifei and narrowed her eyes. Junior Marshal Brother Lin, it's good to be bold, but sometimes if you don't know how to restrain yourself, you'll bring trouble to yourself. I'll give you one last piece of advice. You're on your own. Lin Qifei glanced at her, and the corners of his mouth hooked up without a smile. Thank you for your advice, Senior Marshal Sister Jiang Ziyuan. My courage is really nothing compared to yours. He spoke slowly, enunciating each and every word clearly. After all, you even dared to distort the truth in front of so many people. What do I not dare to do? Jiang Ziyuan's heart sank. She tried to control her anger and forced a smile. Junior Marshal Brother Lin, what do you mean by that? I don't understand. The position of the princess consort is decided through a competition. That day, you lost from the beginning to the end, but you didn't know that the princess consort is inferior to you in every aspect. Senior Marshal Sister Jiang Ziyuan, how did you say that? With every word Lin Qifei said, Jiang Ziyuan's face turned paler. By the end, her face was pale and her body was trembling. You. She opened her mouth, but couldn't say anything to refute him. Because what Lin Qifei said was true. She lost to Chu Luiyue in more than one aspect. Seeing that Jiang Ziyuan didn't refute him, the crowd gradually realized something and looked at each other. Most of them didn't know much about what happened at the Yuntian Tower. Occasionally, they heard some news, but it was mostly from Jiang Ji-won and the others. Why was Lin Qifei's words so different from what Jiang Ji-won said before? Senior Marshal Sister Jiang Ji-won. Since you lost, you can also say that you won. Then, even if I lose, it shouldn't be a big problem, right? Lin Qifei asked. Why don't we have a competition to see who will win? Beast Park. Everything was calm. Elder Yu looked in a certain direction and frowned in confusion. It has been a few days. Why is there still no news from Chu Yu's side? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1263. He originally thought that it would be good enough if Chu Yu could survive one night. Who knew that Chu Yu had not sent out any signal for help until now? And from the situation of the Xian formation in the Beast Park, he was indeed fine and seemed to be staying in one place all the time. Could it be that he found an excellent hiding place? Elder Yu thought to himself. But the mythical beasts in the Beast Park were not so good-tempered. For some reason, the mythical beasts did not cause any trouble until today. He thought for a while and decided to wait a little longer. If Chu Yu could really survive a month in here, then he would really have a whole new level of respect for Chu Yu. Chu Luyue, who was in the cave, had almost forgotten about the passage of time. The surrounding force of heaven and earth surged into her body and flowed through her limbs and bones before finally gathering in her dantian. As the surrounding force of heaven and earth increased, the 7 lines on the water droplet became brighter and brighter. But sensing this movement, Chu Luyue was unable to relax. Because according to her original calculations, she should have broken through a few days ago. But for some reason, all kinds of force of heaven and earth were circulating in her dantian, and there was no movement until today. Chu Luyue was puzzled. Breaking through to the peak of rank 7 was not a difficult thing for her. According to her past experience, she would be able to break through in less than a day. But now, the situation was developing in an unknown direction. After thinking for a while, Chu Luyue decided to wait patiently and continued to devour the surrounding force of heaven and earth. After some time, finally, there was a slight fluctuation in her dantian. Then a vigorous force surged out from within. This force had a trace of a familiar aura. Chu Luyue was stunned for a while before she realized that this force seemed to be the force of heaven and earth that she had inherited from Taizu of the northern underworld. Ever since she had devoured all of this force of heaven and earth, it had quietly entered the water droplet and did not cause any movement. Chu Luyue did not expect that this force of heaven and earth would suddenly surge out at this moment. After a long period of nourishment and refinement in the water droplet, this force of heaven and earth had become extremely pure. In an instant, it surged towards Chu Luyue's body. Chu Luyue was stunned. Then, she felt waves of piercing pain all over her body. She was startled, but she immediately understood something. This force of heaven and earth was going to help her break through to rank 8. After realizing this, Chu Luyue made a prompt decision and began to guide the force of heaven and earth. Although she did not know why this happened, it was a rare opportunity, since she could directly break through to rank 8. Why not give it a try? Under Chu Luyue's intentional control, the originally messy and chaotic force started to flow into her Yuan meridian in an orderly manner. The Tianjing Yuan meridian's endurance was much stronger than the Daijing Yuan meridians. Hence, after the initial piercing pain, Chu Luyue's body quickly adapted to the strong impact. During this process, some of the power had also silently fused into her flesh and bones. The force of heaven and earth continued to surge out of the water droplet. After all, it was the force of heaven and earth left behind by a god-rank powerhouse. Its power could not be underestimated. This force of heaven and earth was stored in the water droplet. Chu Luyue had never paid much attention to it. It was only now that she began to devour this force of heaven and earth that she realized how terrifying it was. As she continued to absorb this force of heaven and earth into her body, her aura began to strengthen rapidly. If anyone else was here, they would be shocked to see this scene, because Chu Luyue's speed of devouring the force of heaven and earth was too shocking. When ordinary cultivators tried to break through to rank 8, they would need to make sufficient preparations. To put it bluntly, they had to accumulate enough force of heaven and earth to break through to rank 8. For a martial artist, the higher they broke through, the more experience they needed. In fact, the force of heaven and earth that Chu Luyue was mobilizing had far exceeded that of ordinary cultivators. Chu Luyue also realized this point, so she could only continue to circulate the force of heaven and earth. She had long known that when the water droplet in her body wanted to break through, she would need to spend more force than others. Early stage to middle stage to peak. At least they were at the same stage, so it was not that difficult. However, every time he advanced in rank, the situation would become very troublesome. Not to mention other things, just the last time she broke through to rank 7, she had spent a lot of effort. She did not expect that the endless force of heaven and earth that she devoured would come in handy during this breakthrough. Crack! A soft sound was heard. The 7th line on the water droplet finally became as bright as the other lines. However, this was only the beginning. Chu Luyue held her breath and did not dare to be careless. She continued to increase her strength and urged the force of heaven and earth to circulate. Boom! A loud sound suddenly came from the sky. Dark clouds gathered and the wind howled. The sky quickly darkened. Ah Cheong, who was guarding the cave entrance, looked up and then turned back as if she sensed something. Is she going to break through consecutively? At the same time, Elder Yu, who was a few mountains away, heard the commotion and was also very surprised. He frowned slightly. Why is the sky turning dark so quickly? No. Suddenly his expression changed. That kid is going to break through? He tapped the tip of his foot and immediately flew in that direction, breaking through in the Beast Park. Is this kid courting death? Digression midnight has begun. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1264. It was dark between heaven and earth. The wind swept the clouds away and whistled past. Such a situation caused the magical beasts in the Beast Park to become restless. Some of them even started to move toward the mountain where Chu Luyue was. The wind was chilling, and the air was cold. However, Chu Luyue, who was preparing to break through in the cave, was unaware of all this. After breaking through to the peak of level 7, Chu Luyue did not stop at all. She continued to devour the surrounding energy of heaven and earth. Then it merged with the energy that surged out from the water droplets in her body. Finally, it seeped into every inch of her muscles, blood, and bones. Her body was like a black hole. No matter how much energy entered her body, she could easily accommodate it. Of course, there were also benefits after breaking through to the peak of level 7. The speed at which she circulated her energy became faster. Chu Luyue closed her eyes tightly. Her mind was clear. There was only one thought in her mind: to break through to level 8. Outside the cave, Ah Cheong, who was in charge of guarding the cave, scratched the ground uneasily. It looked at the surroundings. It was already evening. In addition, Chu Luyue was about to break through. Dark clouds gathered in the sky, and the light was even dimmer. Many things could not be seen clearly. As far as the eye could see, it could only see the dark, undulating mountain range. Some soft sounds came from all directions. A hint of alertness flashed across Ah Cheong's eyes. When Elder Yu arrived, the first thing he saw was such a scene. A huge adult steel-spine beast was standing in front of a cave. It was majestic and vigilant. Its reaction was extremely sensitive. The moment Elder Yu arrived, it sensed his aura and looked up. Elder Yu's heart skipped a beat. This steel-spine beast was looking at him with eyes full of hostility and warning. It was as if it would fight to the death if he took another step forward. Elder Yu frowned. This steel-spine beast. What's wrong with it? He had been in the Beast Park for quite some time. The magical beasts here were more or less familiar with him. Under normal circumstances, both parties were more polite when they met. It was rare for them to quarrel. But this time, this steel-spine beast took such a stance when it saw him. It was really strange. It looked as if it was protecting its cub. But the commotion came from inside the cave. Logically speaking, the one inside should be Chu Yu. Elder Yu was puzzled. But he did not dare to act rashly. The demonic beasts in the Beast Park were usually quite restrained. However, they were not contracted. The pride and wildness in their bones determined that they were definitely not easy to deal with. At this moment, some strange noises came from the surroundings. Elder Yu looked serious. There were quite a few magical beasts in the forest, and they were all approaching this place. Their target was the cave. This made him even more certain of his guess. Chuyu must be in the cave, preparing to break through. When cultivators were breaking through, they would often draw upon the energy of heaven and earth. However, in the Beast Park, there were a large number of high-level magical beasts, and even mythical beasts. They had a natural thirst for power. Under normal circumstances, they would restrain themselves. But magical beasts who were preparing to break through could activate a large amount of energy. Unfortunately, they were very weak now. Therefore, in the eyes of the magical beasts, they became a piece of fat meat. At this time, many magical beasts would fight for this piece of fat meat. Chuyu breaking through in this place at this time. Wasn't this putting himself in danger? Elder Yu was anxious. But at the same time, the steel spine beast's reaction made him even more puzzled. Could it be? It was protecting Chuyu? As soon as this thought flashed through his mind, Elder Yu subconsciously shook his head. How could it be? Adult steel spine beasts were magical beasts. They were ruthless, cold, and merciless. They were especially wary of humans. He had stayed in the Beast Park for so long. It was difficult for him to even get close to them. Not to mention Chuyu, who had just arrived a few days ago. But looking at the steel spine beast, other than this, he could not think of any other explanation. After thinking about it, Elder Yu decided to wait and see. If something really happened, it would not be too late for him to take action. The people outside did not know about the undercurrent in the Beast Park. Halfway up the mountain, Lin Qifei's words left Jiang Juan with no way out. Countless pairs of eyes looked over. Their gazes were different. Jiang Juan's heart was filled with resentment toward Lin Qifei. He did it on purpose. Okay, I promise you. Jiang Juan raised her voice. Lin Qifei smiled. Then I'll have to trouble you, senior sister Jiang Jiwan. After saying that, the two of them prepared to start the battle. The onlookers looked at each other. Their eyes were filled with unconcealable excitement and curiosity. Elder Hua Feng and the others also noticed the situation here and looked over. Xu Feng, your new disciple is quite arrogant. Elder Dan Qing said with an indifferent expression. You've only been in the academy for less than 3 months. Yet you already have such courage. Your courage is truly commendable. How could Elder Xu Feng not hear the sarcasm and disdain in those words? Instead, he was not angry. Instead, he laughed. Haha, although Ji Fei usually doesn't talk much, he is indeed a person with a temperament. If you want to become strong, you have to have the courage to challenge the strong, right? However, this child has always been steady. He usually won't do things that he isn't sure of. Today's battle. Actually, I'm also very curious about who will win. Elder Dan Qing's face darkened. He sneered in his heart. Lin Qifei had a domineering personality. Now even Xu Feng had become like this. How could a brat who had just entered the Azure Cloud role be a match for Jiang Jiwan? He flicked his sleeves and said coldly, It's good for young people to suffer more and suffer more setbacks. Elder Xu Feng raised his eyebrows and pretended not to hear anything. He changed the topic. Actually, that's not important. After all, this is just a small competition. The most important thing is for everyone to learn from each other and improve their strength. On the other hand, Jiang Jiwan, Dan Qing, I saw that she has been in a daze today. She doesn't seem to be in a good state. Elder Dan Qing frowned. In fact, he had noticed this as well. Based on his understanding of Jiang Jiwan, she should have encountered some trouble. Coupled with what Lin Qifei had said just now, her expression looked even worse. Actually, everyone has times when they are haggard and tired. This is normal. But no matter what, there are some things that shouldn't be said carelessly. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.